Chapter 1069. This year's Chinese New Year came early. Because Yangwa didn't go home to accompany her parents last year, she finished her work in Yangcheng and brought Chi-Chi home early. Just like last year, Fang Bei went home first. After the second day of Spring Festival, Poplar Fruit went to Yangcheng to pick her up. Speaking of which, Yangwa had bought a new car for Fang Bei, who already had a driver's license, before the new year. Originally, he wanted to buy her a BMW Mini. The standard was more than 400,000 yuan, but Fang Bei thought it was too expensive. Then, she and Chi-Chi both took a fancy to the Volkswagen Beetle. This was a classic car model that couldn't be more classic. With its round shape and various round dashboards inside, it captured the hearts of the two girls. Although the Beetle wasn't as luxurious as a BMW, it wasn't cheap either. Poplar Fruit felt that since the Beetle was made in Germany, it was at least safe. So, he didn't have any objections. Of course, when they bought the car, Poplar Fruit secretly told Laogua, the owner of the Land Rover in the past, to buy Fang Bei the best version of the Beetle. As for Fang Bei not liking the flame-like red, Poplar Fruit didn't find it strange. Although they bought a new car for Fang Bei, Poplar Fruit still drove Fang Bei back to school and back home as usual. Her car was driven in the city at most. Fang Bei couldn't outrun it, so Poplar Fruit was worried. Brother Jia. Ha ha ha. When they got home, Kiki was like a wild cat. Not only did she play, but she also held onto Yang Lingjie as if Yang Lingjie would give her candy. In fact, Yang Lingjie was annoyed. Now that he was in primary school, he felt like a little adult. Whenever he faced Kiki, he would put his hands behind his back and pretended to be reserved. As a matter of fact, Kiki, who had just chased the poultry in the yard, ran back to the lobby on the first floor. She stepped on the chair and climbed onto Yang Lingjie's back. Then, she hugged Yang Lingjie's neck and kissed his face. Stop fooling around. Yang Lingjie shook his head in annoyance, but because she was his sister, he couldn't bully her too much. Otherwise, his grandmother would beat him to death with a broom. Kiki, can't you see that I'm doing my homework? Why are you doing homework during the holidays? Kiki blinked her big eyes and asked curiously. Because this is called winter vacation homework. It's homework for the holidays. Yang Lingjie raised his head, as if he felt that he was more impressive than Kiki because he had homework to do. Then why doesn't Kiki's papa do homework? Kiki scratched her head and asked. Papa is also on holiday. Yang Lingjie was a little confused. He stammered, I don't know, maybe uncle is an adult? Yes, adults don't do homework. Why don't adults do homework? Kiki asked innocently. At this moment, Yang Lingjie's heart almost collapsed. He knew that this cousin of his had 100,000 whys, but when she really annoyed him, he realized how terrible it was. Okay, Kiki, come here. Don't disturb Brother Jie doing his homework. If your brother Jie can't finish his homework, the teacher will spank him after the Spring Festival. Poplar Fruit smiled and came to Yang Lingjie's rescue. No, Kiki wants to see Brother Jie do his homework. Kiki shook her head, hugged Yang Lingjie, and refused to move. She didn't see Yang Lingjie looking at Poplar Fruit with a pitiful look for help. Poplar Fruit thought for a moment, moved a chair for Kiki and let her sit aside, and said, Kiki, you sit aside and watch. Brother Jie can only play with you after he finishes his homework, so don't talk and disturb Brother Jie. Okay? Kiki half leaned on the table, swung her little head with two ponytails, and smiled like a crescent moon. She happily replied, Okay. Kiki really didn't say anything. Yang Lingjie secretly glanced at Kiki and found that she was looking at his book, so he breathed a sigh of relief and continued to do his homework. However, Yang Lingjie's learning talent was not good. He bit the end of his pen and didn't move for a long time. Kiki looked at him and wanted to say something, but stopped. The two of them were silent like this for a long time. Finally, Kiki couldn't take it anymore. She held her cheeks, squeezed her face round, and asked in a muffled voice, Brother Jie, why aren't you doing it? What? Kiki's voice wasn't loud, maybe because she was worried that her father would hear. Even Yang Lingjie couldn't hear it clearly. Kiki repeated it again, and this time Yang Lingjie understood. His little face turned red, as if he was being looked down upon. He pouted and said unhappily, "What do you mean I'm not doing it? I'm doing it. It's just a math problem." "Kiki, do you know what math is? It's very difficult. I need time to think." "Is that so?" Kiki suddenly understood and nodded. She laid down again and rested her chin on her arm, her big bright eyes staring at the book in front of Yang Lingjie. Yang Lingjie was pained by Kiki's gaze, but Kiki was very quiet and didn't disturb him, so he couldn't chase her away. Just like this, after struggling for a long time, he finally wrote down the answer to the first question. Chi-Chi abruptly straightened her body and gave Yang Lingjie a fright. The pencil drew a horizontal line on the notebook. Kiki blinked her eyes in confusion. She stretched out her small white finger and pointed at Yang Lingjie's winter vacation exercise book. She asked, "Brother Jie, this doesn't seem right. 6 plus 4 doesn't equal 7. It should be 10. Yang Lingjie himself couldn't judge the answer that Kiki said, so he asked in confusion, "Why?" "Because 6 plus 4 equals 10. Kiki answered very seriously. These basic calculations were almost all based on intuition, and if Chi-Chi was asked why, the little fellow really couldn't say it. "Then you must be wrong." Yang Lingjie shook his head and said solemnly, "I'm 5 years older than you. I'm the big brother, and you didn't go to school and didn't learn math." "Well, I did is right." He was quite confident. "Who said I didn't learn math?" After being looked down upon, Kiki was unhappy. She pouted and ran outside to the courtyard. Yang Lingjie thought that he could finally have some peace and quiet. In the end, Kiki quickly came in with a phone. She called Fong Bei. Of course, she wasn't complaining. Kiki was just asking Mama Ma, who was the best at math in her heart. Holding the phone in her hand, Kiki tiptoed and pushed the phone in front of Yang Lingjie. She said, "Brother Jie, you're wrong. My Mama Ma said that 6 plus 4 equals 10, not 7. In the end, Fong Bei had the authority. Yang Lingjie's confidence suddenly disappeared. Moreover, in front of Fong Bei, he felt that he had lost face. Fong Bei was already laughing on the other end of the phone. She comforted the depressed Yang Lingjie, and then patiently told him the process of the calculation and some tips. "Xiao Jie, don't be discouraged. Wait for sister to come over. You'll know in a few days." Chapter 1070. In Yang's hometown, there was a change of parents. This wasn't something new in Yang's hometown. After Poplar Fruit came back from Liang City last summer, he talked to his sister, Yang Ping. Yang Ping told him that the new county party secretary was also surnamed Yang. His name was Yang Rongwan, and he was a leader from the city. This time, when he came back and chatted with his family for dinner, Poplar Fruit asked Secretary Yang again. He was mainly concerned about the family's business. After all, when Chen Longjiang was here, he took care of the Yang family's business. Now that Chen Longjiang had left Guangdong province for a year, he did not know if there were any changes. The good influence is indeed less, but I don't see Yang Rongwan have any opinions about us. Yang Ping said, "Anyway, the business will continue and we can make a lot of money. It's normal for the growth rate to slow down." Yang Chongwan said, "Over the past year, I have often brought gifts to visit the leaders in the county. I also want to visit Secretary Yang, hoping to maintain the previous relationship. If it was last year, everyone would be very happy for us to visit. But at the end of the year, and in the past few months, the country has been strict. No one dares to casually reach out, so we have been rejected several times." Yang Chongwan said, "It shouldn't be that their impression of us has changed. I asked a few of my good business partners and found that the situation is similar." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "It's okay. The country's action is a good thing for us businessmen. It reduces the burden of giving gifts, and we don't have to do some illegal bribery all day long. Our family's business can compete with others openly. What are you afraid of? If we compete openly, we are not afraid. I'm afraid that if we compete openly, others will be unfair to us." Yang Ping patted her scholarly brother's head and said angrily, "Forget it. You don't have to worry about the family's business. We will take care of ourselves." Poplar Fruit smiled and did not care. He really didn't like to participate in these business operations, so he didn't ask about the family business. Until now, he didn't know how big Yang Ping's family business was. But to be honest, In terms of the construction of our hometown, which one do you think is better, Yangrong or our former Secretary Chen? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Secretary Chen, please feel better, Yang Chengwan said without hesitation. Yang Ping nodded in agreement. Secretary Chen sincerely wants to do good things for the people. Look at how much has changed in our county since he came here. Not only has everyone's income increased, but so has everyone's quality of life. Yang Tai, who was beside him, also added a few words. He was usually a man of few words. He would only say a few words if it was a topic that interested him. In his eyes, the best thing that Chen Longjiang had done was to renovate old and dilapidated houses. Not to mention Poplar Fruit's family. In the entire village and town, old thatched houses and mud houses were rarely seen. Since the first year he came, there had been a renovation policy. The government subsidized, and the villagers paid for part of it themselves. They had been completely replaced with bright, clean, safe, and stable brick houses. It's not that Yangrong doesn't do good things, but it feels different, Yang Chengwan commented. When you came back, you should have seen that the street lights in the county had been replaced. Then, I heard that the county's Liberation Road will be built to connect to the highway. In the future, it will also become a new commercial area. Our family has already bought a few pieces of land there. I have 3 pieces, and Mom has 2 pieces. If you want, I can also buy a few pieces for you. Yang Ping said happily, these pieces of land will definitely appreciate in the future. When the time comes, we can build a few houses and rent out the shops. Then, we will make a lot of money. Now wasn't the time to talk about buying land. Poplar Fruit continued to listen to Yang Chengwan. Aside from the new road, I heard that the county is going to build a cultural plaza. It's said that a feng shui master has instructed that this cultural plaza can gather popularity and wealth. Only then can our hometown prosper. If that's really the case, it's not bad. But why do I feel that these changes are a little flashy? Furthermore, isn't it too fast? It's only been a year, and there's already a road and a plaza. We're not in Guangzhou. Do we have so much money to invest in this? Poplar Fruit asked, puzzled. Poplar Fruit had noticed the street lights when he came back. But now that he thought about it, it wasn't that the street lights in the past were useless or not bright enough. Investing a huge amount of money to change all the street lights in the county didn't seem to improve the quality of life of the people. That's what I mean. Yang Chengwan and Yang Tai drank a few cups of rice wine and spoke more enthusiastically. Now, some people think that Yang Rong is doing a political project. Xiao Guan, keep your voice down, Su Jinfeng said worriedly. She stood up and went to the courtyard to lock the gate. It's fine. He will not come to this remote place. Yang Chengwan waved his hand and said, how many times has he been to the countryside in the past year? Other than the 2 times on TV, he has not been to the countryside. Don't worry. Those who don't do good for the people are not good officials. Yang Tai knocked on the table. He drank a lot and said, that's right. Dad, what you said makes sense. Yang Chengwan smiled and said, when I was drinking with a few of my former classmates, they also said the same thing. This Yang Rong, he is afraid that others will compare him with Secretary Chen. In the past, there was a deputy director of the county committee office. He accidentally talked too much in the office and was reported to Yang Rong by someone with bad intentions. The next day, he was transferred out of the county committee office. I don't know where he went after that. Anyway, he was demoted. Yang Chengwan said, he's just anxious to do good. So, whenever a political project looks more attractive, he wants to do it. He wants to pounce on it. Yang Chengwan said disdainfully. In short, he is not a good person. Yang Ping rushed to say. Her vulgar but reasonable words attracted the cheers of a few men. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, it's a pity that Secretary Chen went to Guishan province and benefited the people there. We only have Yang Rong left. He is a parent official who works for the sake of being an official. No matter what, we still have to do business with a conscience. Earn the money that should be earned and do what should be done. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Our business can only prosper because of the support of the people in the village, the countryside, and the county. Since we have money and become rich, we still have to consider doing some good deeds within the scope of our ability. I understand. I have learned before that if you are poor, You should take care of yourself. If you are rich, you should help the world. Yang Ping said with a smile. Chapter 1071. Speaking of Yang Rong arrived. However, it was not Yang Rong himself. He had sent a message to Yang Chongwan through his own people in the town, saying that he had heard that Poplar Fruit had come back and wanted to see him. After the person who came left, the Yang family's group of people sat together staring at each other. Regardless of how Yang Rong knew that Poplar Fruit had come back, Poplar Fruit and Yang Rong had no interaction. Why would Yang Rong take the initiative to meet Poplar Fruit? Yang Ping and Yang Chongwan, who were the owners of the Yang family's business, had never received such treatment. Just now, Yang Chongwan had said that his relationship with Yang Rong was lukewarm. Sometimes, when he asked to see Yang Rong might not even receive him. His attitude is really annoying. Yang Chongwan drank some wine. He was usually quiet, but now he said angrily, "Why should our Yang go and see him? Who does he think he is? Is he such a big shot? If he wants to see him, why don't he visit him himself?" Okay. Yang Ping slapped him on the back and said, "Fruit will decide whether to go or not. You don't have to be an angry youth here." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I'll go. Why shouldn't I go?" No matter what others said about Yang Rong, since Yang Rong was the official of his parents' hometown and he asked someone to send a message, he should pay him a visit. No matter whether he got along well with him or not, he couldn't leave a bad impression on others. After all, his sister and parents had to live and do business in the county. The next day, Poplar Fruit drove to the county by himself, with a gift in the car. It was bought by Poplar Fruit from abroad. It was a handicraft of the Eiffel Tower. It was not worth much, but it looked good. After being assembled, it was more than half a meter high and looked majestic. It was a very good decoration. In fact, Poplar Fruit had other gifts, such as the Lacoste belt, which was also bought in France. One belt cost tens of thousands of yuan. If it was Qianlong Jiang, he would have given him this gift. After all, the relationship between the two families was very close. Qianlong Jiang was more like Poplar Fruit's uncle, and they had a very good relationship. It's normal for a nephew to give a gift to an uncle, but forget about Yang Rong. He wasn't familiar with him. Furthermore, he was an official. If he gave such an expensive item, he would probably be charged with bribery if he was investigated. Yang Rong's figure was very different from Qianlong Jiang's. He was shorter and chubbier, similar to the locals. However, he could not speak Poplar Fruit's native language, but he could speak Cantonese fluently. "Poplar Fruit, it's an honor to meet you." Poplar Fruit was surprised. When Yang Rong saw him, he was very enthusiastic. He shook Poplar Fruit's hand and said with a smile, "I've always heard of your name, but I haven't had the chance to meet you." Poplar Fruit was a little flattered. He smiled and said, "Secretary Yang, what are you talking about? What do I have to make you worry about me?" "Haha, Poplar Fruit, your surname is Yang, and so is mine. We were also from the same family 500 years ago. Since we're from the same family, I'll be frank," Yang Rong said with a smile as he tried to get close to Poplar Fruit. "You've been on the news several times. Not to mention our county, even the leaders in the city often talk about you. It's just that you're too ungrateful. After you became famous, you didn't even go back to your hometown." Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hand and said, "Secretary Yang, don't say that. How am I famous? It was just a small achievement, but it was still insignificant. To be able to appear on the news broadcast was all thanks to the blessings of others and basking in the glory of others. I'm just a student, an ordinary student who studies knowledge. You don't have to flatter me." No matter what, Yang Rong listened and felt that it was reasonable, but he still smiled and led Poplar Fruit to the sofa to sit down. He said, "You're still a little famous in front of the people of the country. Then, you've also brought honor to all the old folks in our county. When people come here, they'll be surprised and say, 'Oh, this is Poplar Fruit's hometown.' Only a beautiful place like ours can cultivate a talent like you," Yang Rong said in a bureaucratic tone. Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded. Although he didn't agree with Yang Rong's statement, he didn't take it seriously. After chatting with Yang Rong for a while, Yang Rong began to ask if Poplar Fruit had any connections at the top. On the surface, he wanted Poplar Fruit to support the construction work in his hometown. If he knew any big leaders, he could introduce them to them. But in fact, even Poplar Fruit could feel Yang Rong's hidden ambition. Just like what Yang Chongwan said yesterday, he was trying his best to climb up the social ladder. He might not be able to bring better policies to Yang Guo's hometown, but from the looks of it, Yang Rong's self-interest was more obvious. Yang Rong learned that Poplar Fruit had won a national award, the National Top 10 University Student. This award wasn't something that ordinary people could get. Although Poplar Fruit was very outstanding, Yang Rong still felt that Poplar Fruit might know some people. Yang Rong pointed out his speculation very straightforwardly. He also told Poplar Fruit that Poplar Fruit could help him, and if there were any benefits, he wouldn't leave out Poplar Fruit. It was very clear. It made Poplar Fruit feel disgusted with him. However, Poplar Fruit didn't show it. Yes, Poplar Fruit did know a lot of big shots, and it was the kind that Yang Rong didn't dare to imagine. Was the first leader of Guangdong province considered a big shot? But Poplar Fruit didn't want to help him, or rather, why would Poplar Fruit, who didn't treat Yang Rong as one of his own, help him? I can win the award because the school gave me a lot of support. How can I know any big shots? I'm just an ordinary student who stays in school all day long. Poplar Fruit and Yang Rong laughed. Looking at Yang Rong's disappointed face, Poplar Fruit felt that it was a bit dramatic. Although Yang Rong, who didn't achieve his goal, didn't change his face immediately, his attitude wasn't as enthusiastic as before. After chatting with Poplar Fruit for a while, Poplar Fruit sensibly asked not to disturb them and wanted to leave. After all, Yang Rong was still the head of the county. He still had the magnanimity to send Poplar Fruit out. However, Poplar Fruit felt that Yang Rong wouldn't want to meet him again. Of course, Poplar Fruit himself didn't want to pretend to be polite with him anymore. There is still a big gap with Secretary Chun. Poplar Fruit sighed secretly, thinking while driving. When Chen Longjiang was in office, he knew that Poplar Fruit had a little relationship, and it wasn't a small relationship. At that time, Li Zichao ordered people to frame the Yang family and capture Yang Chongwan. Before Chen Longjiang had time to save him, Zheng Yujie took care of the matter from top to bottom. It was impossible that Chen Longjiang didn't understand the relationship in it. But how magnanimous was Chen Longjiang? He didn't cling to Poplar Fruit or anything. He did real good things for the people in his hometown, unlike Yang Rong. I hope it won't bring trouble to the family. Poplar Fruit shook his head and went home. Chapter 1072. Just like last year, Poplar Fruit rushed back to Yangcheng early in the morning on the second day of Chinese New Year to bring Fong Beibei home for Chinese New Year. Poplar Fruit wanted to invite Fong Yu's parents over, but they didn't agree. It was probably because their daughter wasn't married yet, so they didn't want to disturb them. At Fong Beibei's house, Poplar Fruit met Fu Chunman. This big sister was quite interesting. She was older than Poplar Fruit, but she still shamelessly asked for a red packet from Poplar Fruit. She even said that she was the matchmaker between Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. Luckily, Poplar Fruit had prepared a few red packets for the nieces and nephews of the Fangs. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to bring Fong Beibei away. On the way, Fong Beibei asked Poplar Fruit curiously, "Hey, why isn't Kiki here?" "She's at home pestering Jia." She received less red packets than Jia during Chinese New Year, so she kept pestering Jia to give her the extra money. Poplar Fruit smiled and glanced at Fong Beibei. "Isn't that what you taught her?" In the past, she didn't know how to count and would happily grab any money. Now, she's become smarter. Fong Beibei covered her mouth and laughed. "You can't blame me for that. It must be because you, as a father, favored one and discriminated against the other. You gave little Jia a lot more, and then you try to fool Chi-Chi with what you gave her." Poplar Fruit chuckled. This was just as Fong Beibei guessed. Fong Beibei's hands gently dug into the white bag in front of her. Luckily, it wasn't a branded bag. She hesitated for a while before looking at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was driving, so he didn't notice Fong Beibei's little movements. He thought that Fong Beibei was sleepy. He slowed down the car and reached out to adjust the angle of Fong Beibei's seat. "If you're tired, take a rest. I'll call you when we arrive." "Uncle." Fong Beibei held Poplar Fruit's hand and shook her head. "No, I have something to discuss with you. Poplar Fruit patted her hand and put it back on the steering wheel. He smiled. Okay, but don't say anything too exciting. Although I haven't seen you for more than a week, we're on the highway. Fong Beibei blushed. She rolled her eyes at him and said, What are you talking about? I'm talking to you, I'm serious. Yang chuckled and didn't continue to make jokes. Here's the thing, Fong Beibei said. Didn't you go home last weekend? I went to the aid station by myself. There weren't many volunteers coming to help during the new year, so I went over to help clean up. Poplar Fruit knew that Fong Beibei didn't want to complain to him about the hard work at the aid station. He nodded and continued to listen. At that time, Grandpa Zhang and Grandma Lu's families came over. Fong Beibei got to the point. They wanted them to go home for the new year. They said that they hadn't been home for 6 or 7 years. There were also people on the internet talking about how unfilial they were as children. If they went home, what about the aid station? Poplar Fruit frowned and asked. Of course, I'm not saying that the old people shouldn't go home for the new year. It's just that the aid station dragged them down. Fong Beibei nodded and said, yes. Grandpa Zhang and Grandma Lu refused to go home. They were worried about the dogs and quarreled with their families for a long time. Then what are you going to do? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Fong Beibei had just used the word discuss, which meant that she already had her own ideas. Grandpa Zhang and Grandma Lu are old, and they usually can't do a lot of heavy work. Fong Beibei said with worry in her eyes. They were already retired, but now they're almost 70 years old, and they are still busy at the aid station. They can't even reunite with their families during the new year. So, I'm wondering if we can take over the aid station from them. Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit's expression and said with courage, Then, we will operate it, just like your remote teaching, and make it a public service. You mean you want to take care of this stray dog aid station on behalf of Grandpa Zhang and Grandma Lu? Poplar Fruit asked. Well, if it were me, Grandpa Zhang and Grandma Lu would be more at ease. Fong Beibei asked hesitantly. However, it may be a little far from home. I don't know if you agree with my idea. She was not worried about Poplar Fruit's opinion of the aid station, but whether the distance of the aid station would make Poplar Fruit worry. After all, even if they drove, it would take an hour and a half to get to the stray dog aid station from home, and the aid station was quite desolate. Poplar Fruit had always been very worried about Fong Beibei going to help alone. Baby, you want to inherit Grandpa Zhang's public service. This is a good thing. Why would I disagree? Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei, who was digging into her bag again, and laughed. Really? Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit with some surprise and asked. Of course, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Before he finished speaking, Fong Beibei happily came up and kissed him on the face. And she sat back in her seat and giggled happily. However, have you thought about how you will make this aid station better after you take over? Poplar Fruit asked. Fong Beibei said with some stupidity. What else do we need to do? Don't we continue to adopt those stray dogs, then treat and feed them? And then? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Then we will continue to invest money in rescuing more stray dogs and cats. Fong Beibei said with bright eyes. That's not how public service works. Yang patted her head and said helplessly, if you really want the best for these dogs, then don't just think about paying for it. Of course, we will definitely pay for it. After all, we're doing charity. Poplar Fruit said quickly as he drove. For example, while you're rescuing these stray dogs, you can also find suitable adoptive families for them, just like how you persuaded me to adopt Goldie. But all year round, I haven't seen many people come to adopt these poor dogs. Fong Beibei said sadly. You can use Weibo or WeChat to appeal to people to adopt stray dogs. Introduce these stray dogs that have been treated and trained, and there is no difference between them and pet shops. You can establish a long-term and extensive publicity channel. Poplar Fruit said. Wait a minute. Fong Beibei took out the notebook in her bag and wrote it down like a studious child. Then, since you are all treating these stray dogs, why don't you open a pet hospital? Poplar Fruit felt that he was full of inspiration and said with a smile, rescue station, pet hospital, adoption center, 3 in 1, absolutely effective. Let me tell you. Think about it. Here at the rescue station, we treat the stray cats and dogs, take care of them, train them, and then send them to the adoption center of the pet hospital. The pet hospital can treat people who have pets. When they see their pets, they can learn about the stories of the stray dogs and see their real situation. Poplar Fruit said. Fong Bei suddenly realized, and she continued. Then, through understanding, they will consider adopting them. In this way, the possibility of these dogs being adopted will be greater. Uncle, you are so amazing. Looking at Fong Bei's overjoyed look, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, they may not necessarily adopt them. After all, they have their own pets, but they can introduce their friends to adopt them. Pet owners should have their own circle of friends. Besides, the profit of the pet hospital can also be used as a part of the subsidy of the rescue station. In this way, we only need to invest a relatively small amount of money every year to make the rescue station operate well. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Next to him, Fong Bei, who was watching Poplar Fruit, had become a little fan of Poplar Fruit, and her eyes were shining like stars. This is the inspiration from watching Divine Dog Shao-Chi, but I have to complain, the acting of the actors in this drama is too bad. Chapter 1073. After the Chinese New Year, Fong Bei went back to Yangcheng and started to drive around in her Beetle. Grandpa Zhang and Grandma Lu accepted Fong Bei's suggestion. Not only did they give Fong Bei their rescue station, but they also helped her find a few veterinarians who had been helping her all these years. This was very important. Although the pet hospital was still far from opening, it was not easy to find a suitable veterinarian. With the help of these veterinarians, the pet hospital and rescue station would have enough people in the early stages. In the later stages, with the help of these veterinarians, there would be more new blood. The rescue station and adoption center were registered as non-profit organizations, but the pet hospital was not. The pet hospital existed as a for-profit private organization. However, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei, who paid for it, would not become shareholders of the pet hospital. All the profits of the pet hospital, excluding the operating costs, would go to the rescue station and adoption center. However, compared to the rescue station, which already had a scale and needed to be improved, the pet hospital had to be built from scratch. Regardless of whether the pet hospital would open branches in every district of Yangcheng in the future, it was still a problem to find a place to open a pet hospital. Where did this come from? Poplar Fruit asked, dumbfounded. 2 days ago, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei were looking for information about stores for rent on the internet. Today, Fong Bei came back with a house deed. Sister Yujie gave it to me. Fong Bei said, protecting the house deed. You can't take it. Why would Poplar Fruit want to take it? He reached out his hand to see where it was. He looked at Fong Bei in surprise and asked, You? Why would she give you the house deed? Didn't I post it on my WeChat Moments yesterday? Fong Bei smiled proudly and said, When Sister Yujie saw it, she called me and asked me out. Then she gave me the deed. He said that it was the house of your former publishing house, and it would be perfect to transform it into a pet hospital. Poplar Fruit knew that the publishing house had moved to a better place, and the old building had been vacated. Yesterday, Fong Bei posted a post on her WeChat Moments complaining that it was too difficult to locate a pet hospital. Poplar Fruit also knew about this. But, Poplar Fruit scratched his head and asked, What's wrong? Have you been keeping in touch? Fong Bei shook her head and said, Not really. The last time Sister Yujie came over, we added each other on WeChat, and then we greeted each other during the New Year. We didn't talk much, but Sister Yujie is really generous. She donated such a building to us. Looking at Fong Bei's happy face, Poplar Fruit knew that the building met her requirements. Now that he thought about it, it was true. The publishing house used to be a small 4-story building. It looked clean on the outside and was not too old, and it would not be a problem if the interior was renovated. The reason why Zhang Yujie decided to move was that the building's location was not good. It was surrounded by residential areas and was not as tall as the commercial building they were living in now. However, this disadvantage was a bit of an advantage for the pet hospital. Since it was a residential area, there would be a lot of demand. Even if there was no subway, It would be convenient to take the bus. Besides, most of the people who had money to raise pets and come to the pet hospital had their own private cars, so transportation would not be a problem. That's it. Let's not choose anymore. I have a hard time looking for a house. Fong Bebe pouted and said, "Tomorrow, I will ask Brother Mosquito to help me find a construction team to renovate it. Okay? Oh, right. I haven't decided how to renovate it yet." She flipped through her big notebook, looking confused. Poplar Fruit stretched out a finger, gently knocked Fong Bebe's forehead, and said with a smile, "Silly, aren't you afraid that you'll be hit by a sugar-coated bullet and then be sold by others?" Although Zhang Yujia was honest and never played any tricks with Fong Bebe, every interaction between the two made Poplar Fruit scared. He was afraid that the two girls with different personalities would fight. Although it was a bit unfair to Zhang Yujia, Poplar Fruit still wanted Fong Bebe to be happy and not be hurt by love. Even if it was her own imagination, he would not allow it. "I'm not afraid. Uncle, you won't just watch me be bullied." Fong Bebe smiled and grabbed Poplar Fruit's finger. She bulged her two big eyes and made a fierce face. It seemed that if Poplar Fruit knocked her forehead again, she would fight with Poplar Fruit. Well, Poplar Fruit was quite infatuated with Fong Bebe's trust. Although the location was settled, Fong Bebe still had a lot to do. The pet hospital could not be opened in a short period of time, at least not by the end of the year. Fong Bebe began to modify the rescue station according to her discussion with Poplar Fruit. First, she introduced more advanced and more automatic equipment. Then, she strengthened the connection with the volunteer teams that she often cooperated with, and sorted out the volunteer schedules and work rules with more scientific methods. Secondly, she hired professional social workers to help take care of the rescue station. After all, volunteers alone could not do all the work. Later, she would buy a special rescue car, set up a special Weibo, WeChat public account, and so on. These all needed time and energy to be perfected slowly. Of course, Fong Bebe was not alone. She had many volunteer friends who had helped at the rescue station in the past few years, as well as Chun Amlin and other friends who had nothing to do but came to help. Everyone gathered together to provide ideas, wanting to make the rescue station better. Oh yes, the rescue station had changed its name. It was no longer called the Stray Dog Rescue Station, but a more practical name, Stray Pet Rehabilitation Center. As the name implied, it was to let these little angels with broken wings, which was also the logo of the center, under the care of caring people, get rid of the haze of wandering early, and then find a family that could give them more love. Poplar Fruit could not help much for the time being, because at the beginning of the school year, Poplar Fruit was too busy. First, he had to restart his teaching tasks for the semester, and then several universities invited him to give speeches. These had all been pushed back. At the end of the month, Poplar Fruit would lead the representatives of the remote teaching student volunteers to Liyang City to bring a happy start to school for the children in the mountains. Oh, yes, before leaving, Poplar Fruit also went on a business trip to Jiangnan to have a mobilization meeting with the Chinese research team that Chan Zongdai had mentioned before. Chapter 1074. Poplar Fruit arrived at Jiangnan University early in the morning. Although he did not see them in person, when Poplar Fruit saw the nameplates on the conference table, beads of sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. They were all famous great scholars. For example, Professor Yuan Xinlin from the Department of Chinese at Beijing University. Not only did he publish many works on ancient Chinese studies, but he also served as the Dean of the Chinese Traditional Culture Research Center of Beijing University. Professor Liu Shufeng from Tsinghua University. In the 1990s, he took the lead in promoting the exchange between Chinese and Western scholars and promoted the spread of Chinese traditional culture. He was also an honorary professor at the University of Cambridge in England. There were more than 10 other great scholars like these two who were at a height that even Chun Zongdai had to look up to. There was also a retired professor from Dongshan University. Although he had retired from teaching, he had never stopped writing. Now, he was serving as a consultant for the country's cultural and educational affairs. The reason why Poplar Fruit was surprised and terrified was because he had read a lot of works by Chinese scholars in order to write his thesis. Most of them were works by these authoritative experts. If he were to say that he was an ant trying his best to climb up in the field of Chinese language research, then these scholars were mountains that he could only look up to. This was not an exaggeration. Compared to other languages, Chinese and Chinese traditional culture was as vast as the ocean. Poplar fruit was only at the beginning, and he had not been able to study it in depth. However, compared to most of the Chinese students, poplar fruit was the tallest among the shorties. It couldn't be helped. Utilitarian university training, these traditional cultures that had little commercial value in modern society, were far less attractive than chicken soup for the soul articles that groaned about nothing. Poplar fruit finally understood why the professor said he was lucky to be able to stand side by side with these scholars who received subsidies from the State Council. Poplar fruit was terrified and excited. The old professors came in one after another. Poplar fruit, as a junior, did not dare to sit arrogantly. He was busy making tea and pouring water. However, unlike what poplar fruit thought, he was not looked down upon or even ignored by these scholars because of his young age and inexperience. Instead, before the leaders of the Ministry of Education arrived, they kindly pulled poplar fruit's hand and asked him to sit down and talk to them. Of course, at the beginning, they tested poplar fruit to see if he was the real inventor of the word-splitting method. They wanted to see if he had real talent. In the end, poplar fruit answered smoothly, which made the old professors very satisfied. "It's a pity to stay at Higashiyama University," said Professor Yuan as he patted poplar fruit's shoulder and said, "English major, why don't you go to university in Beijing? With your talent, you can choose any university in the country, including our capital university. You can choose any university you want. You have to know that in terms of academic atmosphere and heritage, the focus of the country is in Beijing. Yes, come to Shuemu University. Shuemu University's Chinese department is the best in the country," said Professor Liu Shufeng. "Poplar fruit, if you come, I can personally be your doctorate supervisor. Just say yes, and I'll call someone to send you an invitation." This was blatantly poaching. Professor Yun of Higashiyama University acted as if the chaos in front of him had nothing to do with him. "Professor Yun, are you really that generous? After all, he is a student of your university." Professor Yin was older than the other professors, so when the others teased him, they still addressed him respectfully. Professor Yin said cheerfully, "It's okay, it's okay. Xiao Yang is under Xiao Chun. If you want to be anxious, it's not my turn. You don't understand." Professor Su, one of Professor Yun's close friends, immediately exposed him. He laughed and said, "Professor Yun is calm. How can poplar fruit be so easily taken away by these guys?" Every year, Beijing University and Shuemu University would send people to other provinces to compete for the top students in the college entrance examination. This was nothing new. Now, they were fighting openly and covertly to snatch Yanghua. The professors from other universities were somewhat uncomfortable, but they could not say anything. When they heard the professor's words, they immediately became interested and asked, "Really? Why do you say that?" Professor Su looked at Professor Yun and saw that he did not stop him. He smiled and said, "Harvard University didn't even succeed in poaching poplar fruit. What do you think Beijing University and Shuemu University can attract poplar fruit?" Harvard rejected him. Harvard wants to poach poplar fruit? The first question was a cry of surprise, but the second question was a question of doubt. "It's obvious that you don't read foreign journals." Professor Yin opened his mouth and said, "When it comes to learning, even if you're from the Chinese department, you can't just shut yourself in. You have to pay more attention to foreign research papers. Don't think that just because our country's research is the best." Poplar fruit's paper was published abroad. Professor Su skipped Professor Yun's preaching and explained to the others, "It's a Harvard journal. Last November, they told the media that they wanted to recruit poplar fruit. The media doesn't count, right? The media is always fooling people. Maybe it's our own translation that made a mistake." A professor asked in confusion, "For so many years, I've never seen Harvard take the initiative to recruit a Chinese student." "Old Chun, You can't look at things with your old eyes. Professor Su laughed and said, "It's true. They even sent the acceptance letter. Professor Yin told me about it during Chinese New Year. He was so happy. Isn't it?" Everyone could see the smile on Professor Yun's face. It made them clench their teeth. However, the old men were not done gossiping. Poplar Fruit was being asked questions by a few professors. The old men listened with great interest as Professor Su continued. "Actually, it's not because of Higashiyama University's long history, strong strength, and interesting." "Why is that? Is it because of Professor Yin?" a professor asked with a smile. He said it with a hint of flattery. "It has nothing to do with Professor Yin. Professor Yin retired a long time ago. Even if he stayed at Higashiyama University, Poplar Fruit might not become Professor Yun's student," Professor Su said. "Old Su, how do you know? I really like Little Yang. Who knows? Maybe I'll be hired back to be Little Yang's teacher." Old Professor Yin said with a sly wink like a child. "Come on, you're already 85 years old. Why don't you stay in Jiangnan to recuperate? Why go to Yangcheng to teach students?" Professor Su was not young, but in front of Professor Yun, the pot calling the kettle black was still the same. The other old professors also laughed and said, "Professor Yun is a man of noble character. He's dedicated to teaching students." Chapter 1075. Professor Yin stopped joking. He laughed heartily and waved his hand. "I'm getting old. I don't have the energy to be a teacher anymore." There was one thing that Professor Yin did not tell them. Even though he would not return to teaching, his student, the most senior professor in Higashiyama University's Chinese department, who was also the teacher who taught Poplar Fruit, would take over his responsibility of teaching Poplar Fruit. This year, Poplar Fruit would graduate with a PhD. Higashiyama University would continue to arrange for Poplar Fruit to pursue a PhD in Chinese. Since Poplar Fruit had this level, Higashiyama University would naturally spare no effort to train him. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was not his student, but he was still his student. That was not bad. Double PhD was an unattainable goal for many people. There were very few people in China who could achieve this level. However, for Poplar Fruit, it was obviously not a big problem. If it's not Professor Yin, then what's the reason? A few old professors asked nosily. "Girlfriend?" "Stupid." Professor Su pointed at them and laughed. "His girlfriend is also from Higashiyama University?" A few old professors suddenly realized. They immediately laughed and said, "If that's the case, we won't poach Poplar Fruit. We'll poach his girlfriend. Poplar Fruit will be coming soon, right?" "Poach his girlfriend?" Professor Su shook his head and sighed. "Do you think it's easy? His girlfriend is a mathematics genius who won the special prize of the American Mathematical Modeling Competition for 2 years. The mathematics department treats her like a treasure. Do you think you could just poach her like that?" The professors usually did not read the gossip on the internet. Now, they were at a disadvantage. However, they were just joking. Now they praised. "Is that so? Then these two children would be incredible. They're both geniuses. Golden boy and jade girl." Professor Su commented, "This is something we can't be envious of. I can only say that Higashiyama University's grave must have been on fire in its previous life. Even if there was a big fire and green smoke, it wouldn't have been able to exchange for such good luck." Old Professor Yin stroked his beard and smiled indifferently. Even though he was extremely pleased with himself, he did not reveal the slightest bit of it on his face. When they were almost done, the leader of the Ministry of Education, who had rushed over from Beijing, began to preside over the meeting. He briefly introduced some of the macroscopic goals that everyone knew about. The main goal of this research team is still the word splitting method that Xiao Yang proposed. The word disassembly method is a brand new but promising Chinese teaching theory. This is something that everyone has already verified. The leader smiled and said, "But how can we further improve this word splitting method, make it more compatible with real-life teaching, and make Chinese learning easier? I'll have to trouble all of you. I'm not an expert, so I don't have any good suggestions to give everyone. I'm just here to deliver the instructions of our country's leaders. The reform and innovation of Chinese teaching is not only a method of innovation, but also the hope of our country's more than 5,000 years of excellent culture to spread around the world. The merit is now, and the benefits are in the future. The leader said seriously. Everyone, our country, our people, and our president all attach great importance to this discovery. We also hope that it can truly become an important help for the spread of Chinese culture and for the Western world to understand our country. Therefore, everyone must pay attention to it, unite, and strive to put this theory to use as soon as possible, the leader said in the end. Everyone knew how to be polite and understood the principles. The leader spoke a lot, but in reality, only Poplar Fruit listened attentively. The other professors just smiled and clapped. They were not very excited. For them, instead of listening to these emotional words, it was better to spend more time discussing how to do this research. Fortunately, in the field of expertise, the leader could not get a word in edgewise. He could only listen with a smile. Then, as if he understood, he reminded Poplar Fruit from time to time, "Comrade Young, everyone here is a senior, the pillars of our country. What they say makes sense. You're still young, so you should learn more from them." Although it was some meaningless words, what the leader said was indeed correct. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Knowledge was like fine wine. The longer it was brewed, the more mellow it became. The old professor's understanding of Chinese was still superior. Under their lively discussion, some of the weak points in Poplar Fruit's theory were dug out one after another. Poplar Fruit was really convinced. Although his talent could be described as monstrous, Chinese was not something that he could learn thoroughly by reading books for a year. Under the guidance of the old professors, Poplar Fruit realized that he was actually still half a bucket of water. He urgently needed to improve in all aspects. However, after the leader left, Poplar Fruit found a problem. It was said that it was a research team, but why did it seem like he was the only one researching? To be precise, it seemed like Poplar Fruit was researching his theory, and the old professors were researching him. Little Yang, will your three contrasts conflict with the onomatopoeia in ancient Chinese? The first part of the explanation was okay, but the old professor's advice hit the nail on the head. This small law might need to be made by Poplar Fruit to make an exception. However, the latter part of the sentence was a bit wrong. Little Yang, you have to analyze this problem from the perspective of, go back and think about it. Don't take it lightly. I want to see the results of your thinking in 2 weeks. Oh, you don't have my email yet, right? I'll write it to you. How did it become homework? Moreover, all the old professors seemed to be picking on Poplar Fruit and giving him questions as if they were not in the same research team. Poplar Fruit was the researcher, and they were just bystanders or supervisors. Was this considered oppression because of seniority? Poplar Fruit was in pain, but happy. After being guided by so many great scholars for a few hours, Poplar Fruit felt like he had opened up his conception and governor vessels. He only needed to fill up his chi to become a master like them. Of course, this was all an illusion. Poplar Fruit's road of growth was still very long. However, Poplar Fruit was already very lucky to have such a large group of near master-level professors guiding him. How many people in the whole of China could receive such treatment? That being said, all the heavy responsibilities, such as the rise of a nation, cultural revision, were on Poplar Fruit's shoulders. Poplar Fruit was also a bit overwhelmed. Ultraman was the only one who fought the monsters on Earth. The children did not get tired of watching him, but Ultraman was also exhausted. Little Yang, you can't slack off. Whether our research team can produce results or not depends on you. When they parted, the old professor's tone was solemn and relaxed. They patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and laughed as they walked away. So cool? That's right. Since Poplar Fruit was here, it should be cool. Chapter 1076. More than 120 students, as well as more than a dozen teachers sent by the Department of Education and the school, arrived at Liang City, which they had been looking forward to for a long time. The volunteer activities of so many people had never been seen before in the history of the major universities in Guangdong Province. Even the graduate student group of Higashiyama University, which had once won the award, only had a dozen people. What's more, this was a cross-provincial, large-scale, and fully funded volunteer activity. It was the first time in the history of domestic public welfare. Zheng Mingsheng attached great importance to this. Before Poplar Fruit left, he called him over and repeatedly told him that he must take care of these children with beautiful hearts and bring them back safely. Indeed, Poplar Fruit, who had never been a class monitor since childhood, had a big deficiency in leadership. For example, as the president of the remote teaching club, he played the role of a spiritual leader at most. Wasn't the daily management of the staff taken on by Wang Yuba? If it weren't for Wang Yuba's relatively weak prestige among so many universities, Poplar Fruit would have wanted Wang Yuba to take over the position of president. This time, leading the team was also a challenge for Poplar Fruit. Although there were teachers helping, in order to maintain the order of the entire team, Poplar Fruit shouted until his voice was hoarse all the way. Not only that, in order to ensure the safety of the volunteer representatives, Poplar Fruit had been running nonstop in Liang City for the past few days. He went up and down the mountain, slept for 3 hours, and then continued to go up and down the mountain. He had recorded in his small notebook that the folkways were tough and prone to conflicts. Even if it was Yang Hua, it was still a bit too much for her to handle. But fortunately, the results were gratifying. Every village was overjoyed at the arrival of the university volunteers. Not only did they welcome them warmly, some villages even prepared the most exciting dances of the Miao people to welcome them. There were also some villages that, upon hearing about the itinerary, could not bear to slaughter pigs and goats during the new year. They waited for the arrival of the teachers before taking out the meat to welcome them. Yang Hua heard that there were a few volunteers who were so touched that they cried. Of course, as the deputy mayor in charge of education, Chen Longjiang was also very generous. He gave his car to Poplar Fruit and also mobilized the Department of Education and the local government's buses to pick up these university volunteers. He did not arrange a grand and luxurious welcome banquet. Instead, he chose to send reporters and cameramen from the TV stations in the city. They were divided into several groups to record the smiles and tears of all the college student volunteers and the children over the past few days. Some of them would be selected as news material, but most of the records would be edited into videos and uploaded to the website of the remote teaching. Every participating student and the children they cared for would keep the videos as the most precious memories in their lives. However, 3 days of interaction was always too short. In the blink of an eye, it was time to say goodbye again. Although the mountains in the morning were like giant dragons lying in the mist, although the flowers in early spring were blooming brilliantly, although the slightly muddy mountain road was already filled with the sounds of insects and birds, at this moment, no one was in a mood to appreciate the picturesque scenery. They were silent along the way, and the oppressive atmosphere made them feel flustered and uncomfortable. Similar to the situation in many villages in the city, all the children in the Xiong family village school had their hands held by the adults as they walked for an hour on the mountain path, sending these big brothers and sisters who brought them endless joy down the mountain. How they wished that this mountain road, which usually made them afraid, disgusted, and bored, could be walked a little longer, just a little longer. However, no matter how long the mountain road was, it would come to an end. At the bottom, the car sent by the county was already waiting at the small store at the foot of the mountain. It was difficult for them to meet each other, and it was also difficult for them to part with each other. Along the way, they were reluctant to part with each other as they gathered in front of the bus. The pure eyes of the children and the most sincere feelings made the university volunteers wipe away their tears. Xiaobing, don't cry. I promise you that I will come back to play with you next time. The female student who comforted the child said that she would not cry, but she was also crying. The boys were a little better. Although their eyes were red, at least they didn't cry out loud. They pretended to be strong and gently patted the shoulders of the children who were holding on to their hands. They said very manly, Okay. A hero does not cry easily. We will meet again in the future. That's right. It's not like we will ignore you when we go back. We can still see each other online. When that time comes, don't let me catch you two mischievous rascals secretly copying other students' homework. But now, all these deterrents were useless. The two mischievous rascals were also wiping their tears and smiling brightly without their front teeth. On Poplar Fruit's side, Xiong Xiaofeng and the other kids were also holding on to his hand reluctantly. Uncle Yang, you promised me that you will bring Kiki along next time, Xiong Xiaofeng said reluctantly. You also promised me that you will study hard this semester and strive to get good results in the junior high school exams. Poplar Fruit laughed and ruffled Xiong Xiaofeng's hair. Uncle Yang, I will help you supervise him. Xiong Anshuan jumped up and down and said restlessly. Xiong Xiaofeng said unhappily, Anshuan, you are 2 years younger than me. It's not up to you to supervise me. Xiong Anshuan puffed out his chest, as if Yangguo was backing him up. He said, my grades are better than yours. I've been the first in class, but you're always the first in class. You're the last. Okay, don't quarrel. Poplar Fruit smiled and patted Xiong Anshuan's head gently, then said to Xiong Xiaofeng, Anshuan's starting point is good, but your results are bad. No wonder others are talking about you. However, learning is something that depends on self-awareness. You have to have the heart to work hard. Xiong Xiaofeng nodded and said seriously, I know, for Kiki, I will study hard. Well, his own daughter became the motivation for other little boys to study hard. This feeling was weird, but Poplar Fruit didn't think too much about it. He just smiled and patted Xiong Xiaofeng's shoulder to encourage him. After lunch, all the volunteer students were sent to the bus prepared by the Liang city government. The return trip was covered by them, so Yangguo could finally breathe a sigh of relief. You have to be careful. I won't be going back with everyone. Poplar Fruit said goodbye to a few of his friends who were volunteers from other schools. He smiled and said, the train is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's meet again in Yangcheng. After working hard for a few days, Poplar Fruit finally ushered in a small vacation. He was going to Kunming to meet up with Song Jiwen and the others. The 2 girls that he missed the most were already waiting for him there. Chapter 1077. Kunming was located on a small plateau. It was the city with the smallest annual temperature difference in the country. It was as warm as spring all year round, so it was also known as the Spring City. However, spring was still the most beautiful season in this city that was blessed by spring. In front of the lecture hall, by the lakeside of Lake Chui, red-billed seagulls from Siberia adorned the charming scenery of this city. On the streets of the city, flowers were blooming. People walked slowly on the streets. In front of the tea house, a lazy puppy wagged its tail, as if it had become the only waiter to greet the guests. The pace of this city was not fast. What was fast were the tourists coming and going. Other than the brightly lit Golden Horse and Blue Chicken House, the most lively place was the Kunming train station, which had the most traffic. Why isn't Papa back yet? In the temporary waiting room, the restless Kiki stood on a chair and leaned on the back, looking left and right. His train is late. Fong Beibei had just received a call from Poplar Fruit. She smiled and said, he might not arrive until 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock? What time is it now? Kiki looked around and then fell into Fong Beibei's arms dizzily. She giggled. There was a clock in the waiting room. Fong Beibei pointed to the right and asked Kiki with a smile, there's a clock. Kiki, what time is it? I'm dizzy. I can't see. Kiki shook her head mischievously. Kiki and Fong Beibei were playing around. Song Jiwen and Chun Anlin came back with big and small bags. Fong Beibei quickly picked up the clothes on the 2 seats next to her and asked them to sit down. Poplar Fruit will arrive in 2 hours. We can't wait. Let's eat first. Chun Anlin handed a bag of food to Fong Beibei and smiled. There's nothing good to eat nearby. The only McDonald's is pretty good. It's cheap and good. Olgua is really too much. Why is he taking the train? Wouldn't it be better to just take a plane? How fast is a plane? It's not like we lack money. Song Jiwen took out his coffee and gulped down a mouthful. He complained. The train was actually 3 hours late. I'm drunk. It's not that we're short of money. It's just that there's no airport in Liang City. It's still a 2-hour drive to a nearby city. Fong Beibei covered her mouth and laughed. Who knew the train would be so late? Kiki likes to take the train. Woo 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 woo. Kiki pouted and imitated the sound of the train. They didn't have to worry about disturbing others because the entire temporary waiting room was extremely noisy. If they wanted to talk, they had to shout loudly. Kiki can't eat so much hot fast food. Fong Beibei opened the paper bag and looked at the fragrant French fries inside. Kiki's big eyes suddenly became bright. She shook her head and said, Kiki can eat. Kiki nervously protected the paper bag. You can eat, but you can't eat too much. Fong Beibei rubbed Kiki's hair and laughed. After giving Kiki some French fries, Fong Beibei didn't allow the little girl to eat. She directly poured all the French fries in the bag to Song Jiwen. Then she spread her hands and said to Kiki, You can't eat anymore. You see, Mama Ma doesn't want to eat. Because Fong Beibei set an example, Kiki didn't make a scene. She just reluctantly watched Song Jiwen eat the French fries. Her pink tongue licked the taste of salt on her mouth. Fong Beibei then fed Chi-Chi some bread and vegetables from the hamburger, as well as some chicken that she tore off from the crispy wrapper that wasn't fried. After that, she ate the rest of the hamburger that she tore apart. Is it enough? Do you want me to buy more for you? Song Jiwen asked. Fong Beibei shook her head and said with a smile, No need. You don't have to eat so much tonight. Sister-in-law, help me take care of Kiki. I'll go borrow some water to make some milk powder for Kiki. Fong Beibei carried a small bag and walked to the station staff. After discussing for a while, the staff brought her to the boiling water room. She took the milk bottle and walked towards the waiting room. Fong Beibei met someone at the door. She moved her body slightly and smiled at the other party. She took the initiative to move aside. However, her good intentions didn't earn the other party's gratitude. They were both women. The other party was wearing black clothes and a cap. Her face couldn't be seen clearly, but she seemed to be from Shijiang. She glanced coldly at Fong Beibei and walked straight out. Fong Beibei felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave in an instant. The other party's gaze was too cold. However, it was only for a moment. Fong Beibei thought that she was hallucinating. The warm milk bottle brought Fong Beibei back to reality. She curiously looked at the back of the woman in black, shook her head, and returned to the temporary waiting room. It was almost 8:30. After Kiki finished drinking the milk, she gradually became sleepy. She fell asleep in Fong Beibei's arms with her head drooped. Sleep if you're sleepy? Fong Beibei took out a coat from the bag beside her and wrapped Kiki in her arms. She gently stroked her hair and said, Kiki wants to wait for Papa. Chi-Chi struggled for a moment before raising her sleepy little head and blinking her eyes hard. She mumbled, You're right. Poplar Fruit had been on a business trip for almost a week. Kiki had missed her father for a long time. Today, she was so happy to welcome her father. How could she bear to sleep? In the past, the little fellow was not so tenacious. Today, she calculated the time by herself. There was less than an hour left. She would be able to see her most beloved Papa soon. She had to wait. Thus, Kiki nestled in the warm and comfortable arms of Mama Ma. She smacked her lips and waited with her eyelids that were about to fall. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, Fong Beibei's phone vibrated. Fong Beibei picked up the phone and handed it to Chun Amlin, indicating for her to listen because Kiki had just closed her eyes. In the end, she was still a child. After waiting for a while, she was drowned by sleepiness. Looking at the corner of Kiki's mouth curled up, she wondered if she had met her father in her sleep. Otherwise, how could she be so happy? Baby, I'm almost there. The train is about to enter the station. Poplar Fruit's hearty laughter came from the phone. Brother Yang, I'm in lawn. Chun Amlin chuckled and said in a low voice, Don't be too loud. Kiki just fell asleep. Well, where are you? I'll get off the train and find you later. You don't need to come over. Poplar Fruit laughed. Brother Yang said that we don't need to go to the station to pick him up. He'll get off the train and come over directly. Chun Amlin lowered her voice and said to Fong Beibei. The main reason was that Kiki was sleeping. If they moved now, the little fellow might wake up. Fong Beibei was still hesitating. She was the same as Kiki. She missed Poplar Fruit very much. She couldn't wait to see him when Poplar Fruit got off the train. Song Jiwen waved his hand and took the phone from Chun Amlin. He told Poplar Fruit the location of the temporary waiting room they were in and then hung up the phone. How old are we now? He'll come over by himself. Song Jiwen laughed. Chapter 1078. The temporary waiting room was actually very large. There were two glass doors that were always open. The smaller one led to the corridor at the back, and after walking up half a flight of stairs, one could reach the toilet on the middle floor. The big door was the entrance and exit, and all the entrances and exits were in that direction. Passengers waiting for the bus and taking the bus came and went. Even though it was almost 10 o'clock, it was still very lively. Because the main entrance was too noisy, Fong Beibei and the others chose to sit in a seat closer to the smaller door. However, Fong Beibei could not sit still. At first, she just kept looking back. Later, she stood up with the sleeping Kiki in her arms and looked at the main entrance. However, she could not see Poplar Fruit's figure. It's been so long since we got off the train. Why isn't he here yet? Fong Beibei muttered. Actually, it was not that long. Only 10 minutes had passed. Beibei, you're almost turning into a rock. Song Jiwen laughed. Immediately, he was poked in the lung by Chun Anlin. Chun Anlin retracted his elbow, glanced at him, and snorted, "Don't make fun of Beibei." What was Poplar Fruit doing at this time? It was the peak hour for people to get on and off the train. Although the train station had a mechanism to divert people, Poplar Fruit squeezed through the crowd and walked toward the temporary waiting room. Then, he entered the sea of people rushing to catch the train. Poplar Fruit was moving against the flow of people. People were pushing against each other. Even if he was skilled in martial arts, he could only squeeze against the wall and move slowly. Even though he was anxious and kept apologizing loudly, Poplar Fruit was still moving at the speed of a turtle. Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. Finally, there was a gap in the sea of people driving the train. The front was spacious, and Poplar Fruit could see the door of the temporary waiting room. We're almost there. Poplar Fruit's gloomy heart finally brightened. The train was late, and the crowd was crowded. Poplar Fruit's mind couldn't stay still. He flew to his girlfriend and daughter's side early. However, he felt an inexplicable throbbing from his heart to his spine. Poplar Fruit's pupils suddenly shrank. This feeling was so familiar, but before Poplar Fruit could think about it, the crowd in front of him became chaotic. With only a slight delay, screams and cries for help could be heard from the temporary waiting room. Poplar Fruit's heart pounded even harder. There was a feeling of suffocation, just like the feeling he had when he and Alan encountered assassins in the United States. However, this time, his heart was not palpitating because of the threat of survival, but because of the safety of the person he loved the most. Fong Beibei and his daughter were still inside, and Song Jiwen and Chun Anlin. Murder, murder! The ear-piercing cries were heart-wrenching. At the same time, it tore Poplar Fruit's mind into pieces. Almost unconsciously, Poplar Fruit pushed the crowd and rushed forward. However, the crowd was too crowded. Many people even fell and tripped over others in their panic. In the turbulent wave of escape, people only cared about themselves and escaped from the terrifying scene. Their minds were blank as to what had happened. Poplar Fruit was the same. He was the only back in the wave of escape that was going against the flow. However, no matter how strong he was and how good his kung fu was, he could only stabilize himself. It was already difficult for him to move forward. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit quickly came back to his senses. He suddenly realized that he was only a hand away from a bloody fugitive in front of him. The other person's face was twisted with fear. He didn't know if it was his own or someone else's blood on his face. He looked like someone from a horror movie. Poplar Fruit's heart sank. He was even more anxious. Poplar Fruit didn't know what had happened inside, but he knew that Kiki and Fong Beibei were in danger. However, the crowd was still in a mess, and the impact was extremely strong. Yonghua was only able to stand firm. He couldn't wait for the crowd to leave. He had to rush to their side as fast as possible to protect them. Poplar Fruit struggled to push two people away. He looked around and made up his mind. He exerted his strength and passed through the crowd. He jumped onto the ticket table on the left. Without waiting for her to stabilize herself, Yonghua squatted down and jumped up with all her might. He was like an antelope leaping from the edge of a cliff. His posture was strong and graceful. However, no one noticed because everyone was running away in a panic. Even the people in the train station hall were scared by the crowd. Poplar Fruit was so good at fighting. Why didn't he step on people's heads and use Qin Gong to pass through? First of all, Poplar Fruit didn't know Qin Gong. Second, reality wasn't a movie. The crowd looked dense, but it wasn't a good place to land. If he stepped on them, Poplar Fruit might not be able to use Kung Fu to support himself. If he stepped on someone's head, wouldn't Poplar Fruit slip? However, Poplar Fruit jumped very high. He flew directly over the crowd. Suddenly, he stretched out his arm and grabbed the top edge of the door. His whole body hung on it. The panicked people below had already squeezed into a group. The weak women and children were squeezed together with the strong men. No one was willing to give way to the other. As a result, the entrance was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. It wasn't until he reached the entrance that Poplar Fruit felt the tragedy of the scene. Cries, wails, and screams merged into one, erasing the fuzziness. It was so clear that it made one feel flustered. The entire temporary waiting hall looked as if it had been swept away by thousands of soldiers and horses. The items were scattered all over the ground. The heavy metal seats were overturned, and one could even see people being pressed under them. What angered Poplar Fruit the most was that as far as his eyes could see, there were 4 or 5 people dressed in black. They were waving long swords that emitted a cold light, chasing and cutting down innocent passengers who were fleeing in all directions. It was a crazy, indiscriminate attack. For some reason, the jargon in the game was reflected in Poplar Fruit's mind. This feeling was especially strong when a tall man dressed in black cut down an old man who couldn't dodge in time without hesitation. That slash was accompanied by the sound of the wind as it struck the old man's head. The old man fell to the ground without a sound. Poplar Fruit didn't know, nor did he dare to imagine the consequences of this slash. It hadn't even been 2 minutes since the beginning, but Poplar Fruit could already see the mess and the horrifying pools of blood on the ground. There were already countless people on the ground. The men in black were still scattered, chasing and cutting down the fleeing crowd. One of them was already holding his sword high and rushing towards the entrance. Poplar Fruit hung on the door and anxiously looked around the temporary waiting hall, looking for the figures he was worried about. Bao Bao, Kiki, Mosquito, and Long, where are you? Chapter 1079. 5 minutes ago, Poplar Fruit was still squeezed in the crowd rushing to the train. Fong Bei was gently patting Kiki's back as she looked out of the door in a daze. Song Jiwen was a little impatient. He yawned, and Chun Amlin stretched a little sleepily. Don't worry, Lao Guo will be here in a while, Song Jiwen mumbled. However, at this time, 2 men in black leather came into the temporary waiting room. They were also wearing caps. Fong Bei, who had been looking at the door, noticed them. Fong Bei was stunned. She suddenly remembered the woman in black she bumped into when she was preparing milk for Kiki. Although there were 2 men who came in, their clothes were exactly the same as the woman in black. Perhaps because of Fong Bei's gaze, one of the men in black seemed to have noticed. He looked over and saw Fong Bei standing there. Fortunately, Fong Bei had already lowered her head subconsciously. This person, so scary. Fong Bei trembled a little as she hugged Kiki. She only felt that her mind was blank. Although she did not make eye contact with the other party, Fong Bei still felt a gloomy coldness like maggots crawling into her bones. Why is this happening? Why do I feel that something is wrong? Fong Bei hugged Kiki and bravely raised her head to look again. She saw that the 2 men in black had separated. They sat down in the crowd and put the long sports bag that looked like a tennis bag on their laps. What were they doing? Fong Bei could not understand and did not think much about it, because she realized that in this big waiting room, there were actually a few men in black sitting. Among them, Fong Bei even saw the woman in black she bumped into earlier. They were all dressed the same, with caps, black jackets, and long pants. There was also a long sports bag in their arms. For some reason, although the surroundings were still noisy and lively, Fong Bei felt that the atmosphere had frozen. It was as if spring in Spring City had turned into winter in Yang City. Brother Mosquito, something is wrong. Fong Bei lowered her head and whispered to Song Jiwen. But before she finished speaking, a riot suddenly broke out. Like a flash of lightning, the first man in black pulled out a long machete from a bag. To be precise, it was a hidden blade. It was shorter than poplar fruit's miao, but it was wider and thicker. Tibetan swords were divided into long swords, short swords, and small swords. Needless to say, most of the short swords and small swords had become handicrafts. The long swords were straight, and they were the sharp weapons used by the Tibetans in the mountains to cut trees and open roads. Although it might not be as beautiful as the miao and tang sword, it won in terms of thickness and sharpness. Every slash was very powerful. Of course, now is not the time to talk about blades. That flash of cold light was a spurt of blood. The man who was complaining to his friend about how difficult it was to buy a train ticket probably did not expect that the man in black sitting silently with his head lowered would suddenly pull out a blade and cut the back of his neck. Many people present did not expect that in the usually noisy but peaceful waiting room of the train station, there would be many people who suddenly turned hostile and pulled out their blades to slash everywhere. There was a young man who had just been bragging to his girlfriend about his heroic past. Under his girlfriend's frightened gaze, a similar cold light came at him. He subconsciously raised his hand and was instantly shaken, followed by a sharp pain. This was the first scream. When a young man saw that his arm was cut in half, he howled desperately. It was just a second of blankness. Suddenly, the whole waiting room was in an uproar. People overturned their chairs, overturned their friends, and scrambled to escape to the door. They didn't know anything. There was only one thought left in their minds. Run. Escape from this hell of killing occupied by a group of lunatics. Fong Beibei was still talking to Song Jiwen about her doubts a second ago, and the next second, such a terrible change happened in the waiting room. Fong Beibei, Song Jiwen, and Chun Anlin were all stunned in place. Kiki was happy because she was still sleeping sweetly in Fong Beibei's arms. In her dream, her father seemed to have bought her delicious candy. In Fong Beibei's arms, there was only safety and warmth. Even if the outside world was noisy, Kiki could sleep soundly. Chun Anlin's kung fu was good, but she was a girl. Moreover, she had never really encountered such vicious thugs, nor had she seen such a bloody scene. She was stunned on the spot, but it was not her fault. Song Jiwen was the first to react. He pulled Chun Anlin with one hand and pushed Fong Beibei with the other. Among the screams, he shouted, "Run! No, don't go that way." Song Jiwen pulled them back. In front of them, there were two men in black who were fiercely slashing with knives. Although there were still people rushing forward, that direction was definitely not a good choice. Who knew? Not only would they not be able to escape the net, but they would also be slashed horizontally by the knives. In front of them, there was already a guy who had been slashed in the back. Blood was dripping, but he was still a tough guy. He screamed and still lowered his head to run forward. But on their side, there were 3 adults and 1 child. They were too big of a target. Song Jiwen pulled Fong Beibei and Chun Anlin back hurriedly, trying to squeeze in the direction of the small door. Even if there was no escape route behind them, even if they ran along it, it would be good to run to the toilet and use the door to block it first. In the panic, Fong Beibei's bag fell to the ground. She did not even bother to pick it up. And the clothes that wrapped Kiki were nowhere to be found. Fong Beibei could only desperately hold on to Kiki, afraid that they would be separated by the crowd. But the small door was too small. People were squeezing and squeezing, and the entire glass door was crushed. Not only did the glass shards fall down, but the sharp door frame that collapsed completely blocked the staircase to the 2nd floor. Some people desperately wanted to rush up, but after all, there were too many people, and they could not move at all. At this time, there was a panicked cry from behind. They saw a man in black holding a knife coming over here aggressively. On the way, he even cut down a middle-aged man who had just raised his head. The crowd wanted to run out, but they were all blocked by the messy chairs in front of them. The only escape route was met by the man in black. His ferocious and bloodthirsty face could be seen clearly. The people who had fled in all directions came back and squeezed together. Someone screamed, "Hurry up!" But they could not go up. Oh no, they were going to be surrounded like dumplings. Song Jiwen panicked, but he was the only man among the three. Although he was scared to death, he still gathered his courage. He blocked Shun Anlin and Fong Bei Bei behind him and said loudly, "Don't be afraid. I will protect you." At this moment, he finally stood in front of Chun Anlin like a man. But what could he use to block? With his flesh and blood? Just as they were about to lose hope, suddenly there was a loud shout. Bow, bow. Kiki. Poplar fruit. Poplar fruit fell from the sky. Chapter 1080. Because his arms were hanging above the door, Poplar Fruit finally found the few familiar figures in the crowd at the small door. What made Poplar Fruit anxious was that a man in black was walking towards them. The long hidden blade had lost its original silver color, and sticky blood was dripping down, forming a ghastly bloody path along the footsteps. Poplar Fruit roared angrily. He exerted strength in his arms, and his whole body hung up. Then, with a swing of his legs, he used the inertia to slide a few meters in the air and jumped into the temporary waiting room. Bow bow, Kiki, don't worry, I'm coming. Poplar Fruit's heart was fearless. He only had one thought, and that was to save Kiki and Fong Bei Bei from the hands of these evil people. As luck would have it, Yanghua just happened to fall between the fleeing crowd and the black-clothed men who were chasing after her. Although it was not a heavenly soldier, Poplar Fruit's appearance still stunned the man in black who was about to cut down a middle-aged woman. Not for food, just away. The man in black shouted a string of strange words, and then he put down the middle-aged woman, raised the knife, and swung it at Poplar Fruit. What was he talking about? Poplar Fruit did not have time to think. He nimbly dodged the knife, and then kicked the man in black to the ground. Get out of my way, Poplar Fruit roared. He did not have time to care about the other men in black who were still attacking. After clearing the men in black in front of him, Poplar Fruit jumped forward. Yes, jumping. Because of the people on the ground, the iron bench, and the suitcase in front of him, Poplar Fruit could not rush forward. He could only jump to avoid the obstacles and rush to the small door. The man in black there had already revealed his sinister smile. Is that Uyghur language? Poplar Fruit's mind seemed to have been struck by lightning. He seemed to have suddenly understood something. Poplar Fruit had never learned the Uyghur language, or rather, he had never fully learned the Uyghur language. His understanding of the Uyghur language was based on studying Arabic, Persian, and the Altaic language family that the Uyghur language belonged to. Poplar Fruit was able to read and understand Uyghur, which was written in the Arabic alphabet and had a large vocabulary derived from Arabic, Persian, and even other languages. When you learn a lot of languages in the world, you can also reach the level of Poplar Fruit. After all, languages mostly influenced and interconnected each other. Poplar Fruit even felt that with the advancement of globalization, other than a few large language families, the other small languages in the world would gradually become assimilated. Just like the current Korean language, a large number of new words were transliterated from English. It sounded a little out of place, but it was indeed similar to English. Poplar Fruit had never practiced speaking before, so he was probably no different from a beginner. Therefore, Poplar Fruit could not be considered to know the Uyghur language. Of course, Poplar Fruit could still try to speak some simple pronunciations. Stop! Poplar Fruit shouted in awkward Uyghur language. He rushed to the back of the black-clothed man, and because of his roar, the black-clothed man's attention was attracted to him. No, it should be said that it attracted the attention of all the men in black. Perhaps it was because they heard the same language, but the man in black looked a little hesitant. Kill him! A deep but sinister shout was heard. It was shouted by a tall man in black, and it was also in Uyghur language. It also completely awakened the hesitation of the man in black facing Poplar Fruit. The man in black's eyes became crazy again. His long hooked nose was stained with blood from other people. He let out a short howl and swung his sword at Poplar Fruit. No! Fong Bei Bei cried out sadly. She knew that Poplar Fruit was good at fighting, but Poplar Fruit was unarmed after all. Yanghua hurriedly retreated again and again, constantly dodging the opponent's saber attacks. His appearance of being surrounded by danger made Song Jiwen and the others tremble in fear. However, Poplar Fruit kept shouting, trying to make the opponent give up. Soon, Poplar Fruit realized that he was too naive. This was a group of ferocious thugs. They were here to kill, so how could they put down their butcher's knife? Poplar Fruit was not Tang Sanzang. Even if he was Tang Sanzang, it was impossible for him to resolve this crazy killing. No, while Yang Guo was being chased, she was still able to notice the situation on the other side. A clearly female black-clothed person was waving a bloody blade at a 3- or 4-year-old boy. How could she do it? Poplar Fruit's face was full of disbelief. He saw a sick smile on her face, and the sword was chopping down on the boy's neck. Kiki should be around that age, right? Poplar Fruit's eyes suddenly turned red. Anger completely ignited his brain. Calm down, forgiveness, all of that scrammed to the side. This group of people in black who were no longer human did not deserve to be treated calmly, and they did not deserve to be forgiven. If she hesitated for one more second, another innocent passenger would be hurt. If she hesitated for one more second, the person lying in a pool of blood might become her friend. If she hesitated for one more second, the knife that was used to slash at the little boy just now would appear before Chi-Chi's eyes. Poplar Fruit's blood was burning. Every muscle cell in his body was awakened. The muscles on his arms and legs, which were usually not exposed, swelled up. Poplar Fruit would not hesitate anymore. He would not show mercy to these thugs. A shadow flashed past, and the man in black who had just raised the sword in his hand to slash at Poplar Fruit was smashed to the ground by his neck. He did not give him a chance to resist at all. Poplar Fruit punched him in the head. One punch, two punches, and the third punch directly smashed the man's skull. His peak cap flew to God knows where. The man in black's eyes had rolled back, and blood was flowing out of his mouth, nose, ears, and other orifices. He did not know whether he was dead or not, but from the looks of it, he was not far from death. The danger at the small door was temporarily resolved, but the other men in black were still killing people. Other than the two men in black, a man and a woman, who were still relentlessly chasing after the passengers who were crying on the ground and curled up in a corner, the other two men in black had already chased the passengers who escaped from the main door to the main hall. Poplar Fruit did not have time to pay attention to the main hall, and he could not see from his angle. However, Poplar Fruit could not stand the two men in black who were attacking the old man and the child in the waiting hall. He grabbed the man in black who had been beaten into a pulp by him and lifted him up high. He was like a soldier who had chopped off the enemy's flag on the battlefield in ancient times, waving it around. "Stop! Come at me if you have the guts." Poplar Fruit roared. His eyes were also red, and he was like an injured wolf with a bloody mouth. The first part was in Uyghur, and the second part was in Mandarin that everyone could understand. Poplar Fruit could not remember how to say the second part of the sentence. His mind was a little confused. In the end, he could not calmly fight like a well-trained soldier, could he? Chapter 1081. Stop! If you have the guts, come at me. Poplar Fruit's thunderous roar attracted the attention of the two men and women in black. Because they saw the man in black in Poplar Fruit's hands who was as soft as mud, the two men and women in black's expression froze. And under their blades, the traveler who thought he was going to die hurriedly used all four of his limbs to crawl away. He couldn't even stand up, so he could only crawl to a safe place to escape. "My matey!" The woman in black cried out in pain, and then she shouted at her companion, "Kill him! I want to kill him!" The man also waved his blade and fiercely said, "Kill him! Kill this Han! Kill all the Han! Avenge you, Shan!" Except for Poplar Fruit, no one could understand their words, but Poplar Fruit was not afraid. He waved his hand at them and shouted in awkward Uyghur language, "Come on, come on." Poplar Fruit's provocation further angered the two men. Both of them held their blades and rushed toward Poplar Fruit. The woman in black, the one who Fong Bebe bumped into before, held her blade with both hands. Her knuckles looked a little white because she used too much strength. It could be seen that her hatred for Poplar Fruit was deep. "Uncle, be careful." Fong Bebe's heart almost jumped to her throat, but she couldn't help, so she could only shout in the crowd. Song Jiwen gritted his teeth and wanted to help Poplar Fruit get rid of one of them. At least the woman in black was good. However, he was stopped by Chun Anlin. Chun Anlin shouted at him, "What are you going to do? Do you want to cause trouble for Poplar Fruit?" Chun Anlin knew Poplar Fruit's kung fu the best. In fact, he didn't fully understand it. Dealing with two thugs, Poplar Fruit shouldn't be a problem. Poplar Fruit had already met the two thugs. He threw away the man in black in his hand and clenched his fists without flinching. The women watching screamed because they saw Poplar Fruit facing two sharp blades with his bare hands. When an egg hits a stone, of course the egg will break, but Poplar Fruit obviously won't use his flesh and blood to take the bloody hidden blade head on. He first gently moved his shoulder, avoiding the woman in black's fierce stab, and then his right hand tightly holding the man in black's right wrist. Poplar Fruit completely relied on brute force to control the man's right hand, so that he couldn't chop it down. Then, Poplar Fruit twisted his right hand in the opposite direction, and the man in black fell out of pain. Poplar Fruit's left hand suddenly slapped the man in black's chest. This slap contained all of Poplar Fruit's anger. "Since you don't treat people as humans, why should I treat you as humans?" He slapped with all his strength, and even used the collapsing force of Xingyi martial arts. The force penetrated the man's body and exploded on his abdominal organs. Pooh! The man in black spat out a mouthful of blood, and his eyes bulged. Even though Poplar Fruit was still holding his right hand, he still fell to the ground with a loud bang. The man in black's heart was shattered, and he couldn't be more dead. Poplar Fruit forgot to dodge, and half of his face and clothes were sprayed with blood, aka Big Brother. The woman in black cried out in grief and indignation, and once again brandished her blade towards Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit didn't think that his slap would be so powerful, but to be honest, Poplar Fruit didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt for killing this man in black who had attacked unarmed and innocent people. Poplar Fruit's heart was only filled with hatred for this woman in black in front of him. She had just killed a 3 or 4-year-old boy with her own hands. Although it was a bit rushed, Poplar Fruit was still able to nimbly dodge the woman's blade at such a close distance. It seemed that the woman in black's skill was better than the other two. Although she was inconsolable, her blade technique wasn't messed up, and Poplar Fruit had to temporarily dodge. Yuhan people all deserve to die," the woman in black shouted while brandishing her blade. Poplar Fruit's eyes turned cold, and once again he quickly grabbed the woman's hand that was brandishing the blade and was about to punch her head. The wind had already broken through her messy hair, revealing her somewhat exotic face. She wasn't beautiful and looked like she was in her 30s or 40s. Poplar Fruit's eyes flashed, and his fist stopped. It wasn't that he couldn't kill the woman, but now that Poplar Fruit had calmed down a little, he didn't want to kill anymore. Poplar Fruit turned his fist into a palm and hit the back of the woman's neck. The woman in black immediately fainted and fell to the ground. This was a small trick that he had learned in the Special Forces. Poplar Fruit used his strength very cleverly, and not only did he not hurt the back of the woman's head, but he also made sure that she wouldn't wake up for 3 hours. The temporary waiting room fell into silence. Outside, there were still people shouting for help, but this place was surprisingly quiet. This was relative because there were still people wailing in pain. Everyone stared blankly at Poplar Fruit, who was standing in the middle like the god of death. It's okay. Poplar Fruit put down the woman in black and collected the 3 hidden blades on the ground. He said, "Everyone, help call the police and bandage the injured friends." It was unknown how many had died, but there were still many injured people lying on the ground, screaming incessantly. Under Poplar Fruit's call, everyone started to act. They called the police while looking out of the gate worriedly, afraid that the demons would come back. People secretly looked at Poplar Fruit. Some were afraid, some were in awe, and some were grateful. Uncle, are you hurt?" Fong Bebe came over anxiously with Kiki in her arms. She cried and stretched out her trembling left hand, wanting to touch Poplar Fruit's bloody cheek, but she was worried that she would touch Poplar Fruit's wound. "Silly baby, why are you crying? It's not my blood." Poplar Fruit quickly wiped the blood on his face with his clothes and comforted her with a smile. "Did you see it? Boo-hoo, I was so worried about you. Fong Bei finally felt relieved, but it was also because she was relieved that the fear and worry that she had been suppressing finally surged up and turned into tears. She began to cry. Okay, don't cry, I'm here. Poplar Fruit hugged Fong Bei and gently reached out to touch Kiki, who was sleeping soundly in his arms and did not know what was going on outside. Everyone, give me a hand. Block the door with chairs, or else they will come back. Song Jiwen's voice came over and woke up Yanghua, who was deeply in love. He finally noticed the cries and screams outside and suddenly remembered that there were still 2 thugs committing murder. Baby, don't run around. Poplar Fruit steeled his heart and pulled Fong Bei away. He picked up the 3 knives on the ground and walked to the gate. I've already called the police. The police will be here soon, Song Jiwen said loudly. He was moving an iron bench with a few strong male passengers. The fainted woman in black was tied up with 5 flowers. If Chen Anlin did not stop them and said that they wanted to keep her alive for the police to interrogate, the victim's family members would have torn her apart. Poplar Fruit stared outside. There were still thugs outside, and it was not just 2, but 3 for no 5. Chapter 1082. Poplar Fruit twisted his eyebrows. He turned around and walked to Fong Bei's side. He looked in her eyes and said softly, Baby, I'm sorry. Fong Bei, who knew Poplar Fruit's character, understood Poplar Fruit's meaning. She nodded and said, I'm fine. You can go. However, these words turned into sobs. Her tears kept flowing down, her nose was red, and her left hand was trembling while holding Poplar Fruit's clothes. Poplar Fruit patted Fong Bei's hand. His eyes were a little red. He couldn't bear it, but he still said, Don't worry, I will come back safely. After that, Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and resolutely turned around and walked to the door. Olgua, don't go. Song Jiwen stood at the door worriedly and wanted to stop Poplar Fruit. The others also looked at him anxiously. They didn't want such an amazing guardian to leave their side. Mosquito, I'll leave this place to you. Block the door and protect Bei and Kiki. Poplar Fruit didn't waste any more words. He handed a Meowdow to Song Jiwen and hugged Song Jiwen's shoulder. He held the remaining 2 Miadeos and ran outside. He couldn't be sentimental anymore. If he delayed for another second, another innocent person would fall into a pool of blood. Hey, Poplar Fruit exerted strength in his dantian and suddenly shouted. His voice shook the entire train station hall and covered the tourists' cries and screams. The train station was not completely defenseless, but most of the security guard were just paper tigers. They had long been scared and fled with the crowd. Only a few security guards had the courage to take out their only equipped batons and fight with the men in black. The scene was very tragic. The 2 security guards knocked down a man in black. However, before they could be happy, a man in black rushed out from the side and slashed at them with a long hidden knife. A security guard stood in front of his companion and blocked the fatal blow. He even grabbed his companion's hand. His companion was able to escape, but he was badly mutilated by the 2 black-clothed men and was on the verge of death. Poplar Fruit's shout finally attracted the attention of the 5 men in black. Poplar Fruit took the opportunity to shout, Chop me. Come on. These 2 sentences were in Uyghur, which Poplar Fruit had just figured out. Next, he brandished the 2 hidden knives and shouted, as if he was showing off his spoils of war. You all deserve to die. I killed all of your people. What my matey, what Jade Mountain? And that woman. Ha ha. He didn't know if they understood Chinese. Poplar Fruit wanted to provoke them and attract all the attention to himself. This way, the innocent people would be safe. You cowards. Trash. Poplar Fruit tried to curse them in Uyghur. At this time, a tall man in black roared loudly in Uyghur language. Under his call, several men in black all brandished their swords and slashed towards Yanghua. That's it. Poplar Fruit was excited. He wanted to kill these thugs who killed without batting an eyelid. Poplar Fruit held the hidden knife. Although it wasn't easy to use, it was still a sharp weapon. He made a Meowdow gesture and faced the first man in black. Because of the distance, the first man in black came faster than the others. However, he didn't expect that Poplar Fruit was not the ordinary people he had chased just now. "Kill!" Poplar Fruit shouted and raised his two knives. Not only did he block the hidden knife that was coming down from above, but he also used the knife in his left hand to cut down. The man in black screamed. The fingers of his right hand, holding the knife, were all cut off. "Do you know your mistake? Why did you sharpen the knife to such a sharp point?" Poplar Fruit didn't let him go. He dodged the falling hidden knife. His body turned, and he used the inertia to cut the man in black with his right hand. The man in black was holding his right hand and screaming. This knife was not fatal, but it was enough to cut open the skin of his arms and break his bones. He definitely lost the ability to fight. In fact, he also fainted from the pain. The tall, black-clothed man in the lead paused. He knew that he had encountered a tough opponent. He shouted and stopped the other 3 black-clothed men. Poplar Fruit looked at him coldly. Holding the knife with both hands, he snorted and asked, "What? Are you afraid?" In a messy train station hall, the injured people were wailing. The people who had fled were still shouting in panic. There were also some people who hid in the ticket hall and the security room, trembling. There were also some people who hid on the second floor. Those who were not afraid of death poked their heads out to check the situation. However, in the middle of the hall, there were 5 people standing with knives. They looked like the masters in the movies. However, compared to the movies, this scene was more realistic. The people who saw were more frightened, because they had just encountered this scene. For men in black surrounded Poplar Fruit, who was wearing a light gray sweater. The contrast was very obvious. After listening to Poplar Fruit's provocation, although it was in Mandarin, they still understood it. Several men in black were so angry that they clenched their teeth. They just wanted to chop Poplar Fruit into meat paste. However, the tall man in black didn't say anything, so they didn't move. They looked very organized and disciplined. Poplar Fruit thought of the terrorist organizations that had been disturbing Xinjiang for a long time, and their martial arts. The woman in black, just now, was very powerful. Then, the man in black who was caught off guard and had his finger cut off by Poplar Fruit also looked like he had been trained to use a knife. Moreover, the 4 people in front of him seemed to be standing in an ancient formation. They formed a triangle with Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit was not afraid. In the past, Xiong Kahu could go in and out of a hail of bullets like a madman, killing the Vietnamese army. How could Poplar Fruit, who had inherited Xiong Kahu's knife skills and madness, be afraid of such a small scene? Poplar Fruit's eyes became sharper. "Hee, you cowards who only know how to attack ordinary people." Poplar Fruit continued to scold, his mouth unforgiving. "You are the coward." One of the men in black cursed back in Mandarin. "You Han people deserve to die. You stole our land. You deserve to die. We Han people and Uyghur people are one family. Your attempts to divide us will all fail." Poplar Fruit shouted. He was not a nationalistic youth or a communist, but he was very clear about the major issues. Over the years, they had done a lot of evil in Xinjiang. Now, they were going to bring disaster to Kunming. Poplar Fruit would not ignore it. "Don't talk nonsense with him." The leader of the men in black scolded in Uyghur. "Kill him, then kill all the Han people. Allah's warriors will win. Allah's warriors will win." The last cry completely lifted the spirits of the 3 men in black. They also roared and rushed toward Poplar Fruit. What? Hearing their words, Poplar Fruit understood, but a trace of doubt flashed in his heart. A piece of information entered his mind, but he did not have time to analyze in detail, because the battle was right in front of him. Chapter 1083. Bang! A loud gunshot echoed in the station hall. Especially since it was a gunshot in the middle of the night, the people who were already scared shrunk their heads in fear. Only a few daring people peeked out and saw a group of policemen dragging 2 people away, one in black and the other in white, from afar. Then a lot of policemen surrounded and sealed off the entire station. The ambulance drove directly to the front of the station hall, and doctors and nurses in white coats ran in with stretchers behind the policemen. Many special police officers with guns searched the rooms one by one. Gradually, Kunming train station returned to its reassuring, noisy state. Yes, instead of the heart-wrenching screams and cries for help, or the silence as if everyone had died, the tourists could now hear friendly Mandarin, which was the best comfort for the frightened tourists. However, this did not mean that the matter had come to an end. Some of the innocent passengers who had died in time were put into black bags by the medical staff, zipped up, and sent to the hospital to await follow-up treatment. The injured passengers were treated in a race against time. After being identified by the passengers, the 5 men in black who were still alive were arrested. Their wounds were bandaged and treated briefly, and then sent to the police station to await further interrogation. The 2 men in black who had been killed by poplar fruit were also sent to the designated location. Naturally, they would be treated accordingly. However, the special police officers were surrounded by a group of passengers. Among them, Song Jiwen and the rest were leading, followed by the excited passengers in the waiting room, and some passengers who had seen poplar fruit's power. "Where did you take my brother?" Song Jiwen's eyes were red, and he grabbed the special police officers by their collars and roared. "I don't understand what you're saying. We're just catching the bad guys. Please understand," the special police officers said with a frown. "What do you mean, bad guys?" A traveler who had just come down from upstairs pointed at them angrily and said, "If it wasn't for that young man who single-handedly defeated 5 thugs and saved us, we would have been dead by now." He even shouted, "I saw people wearing clothes like yours when I was upstairs just now. You shot our little brother. You shot our hero. I saw you dragging the body away." They were trying to bury the truth. "You guys don't beat up the bad guys, but you're always bullying your own people. Give us back our savior." A middle-aged woman, who had almost been killed by the thugs in the waiting room, bared her fangs and brandished her claws at the special police officer in front of her. Song Jiwen also angrily attacked the SWAT team with the other crowd. At this time, Chun Anlin was sitting on the ground behind them with Fong Bei in her arms. Kiki had already been woken up. She didn't have enough sleep, so she grabbed Fong Bei's sleeve. Hearing Fong Bei's cries, she also felt sad and wailed loudly. "Everyone calm down, calm down. We haven't fully grasped the specific situation yet. When the investigation comes to light, we will definitely give you an accurate answer, okay?" The captain of the SWAT team had a bitter face and shouted loudly in front of them. "By the time you finish your investigation, our hero will have already been destroyed by you," the angry traveler shouted. "The police are fucking pigs. What did you say?" One of the SWAT team angrily pushed him, but he was immediately dragged to the back by the experienced veteran team members. The veteran team members knew that in this situation, they couldn't make a move. "I said you were pigs." The traveler looked at the person who pushed him with disdain and said, "Isn't that so? How long did it take you to get here? If it wasn't for our young man hero." His eyes were a little red. He sniffed and said with an uncomfortable sobbing tone, "If it wasn't for our young man hero stepping forward and taking care of all the thugs, will we still be alive until you came to save us? You fucking indiscriminately killed our young man hero with 1 shot. You have sinned." The traveler was sad and wailed to the sky. After being stirred up by him, the surrounding people forgot what they were doing and started to cry. This feeling was as if the only belief that they relied on to survive had been destroyed. Suddenly, they were confused, in pain, helpless, and heartbroken. In fact, many people were hiding inside and didn't know what was happening outside, including the medical staff and police officers who had just come in. They couldn't understand why the rescued people were surrounding the SWAT team members. They were crying so sadly. This sadness made the spectators feel an inexplicable sorrow in their hearts, and their eyes immediately turned red. The SWAT team leader was actually very innocent and wronged, but when he heard them cry, he wanted to cry too. Didn't they see that many of the SWAT team members were wiping their tears? Although it could be that it was a touching sight, it was tears of not being understood. At this time, someone stepped forward and bowed to the crying crowd in front of him. He said loudly, "Fellow villagers, I am the director of the Kunming Public Security Bureau, Huang Mingshi. Can everyone listen to me for a moment?" He paused for a moment before continuing. "We really don't understand what happened just now, but don't worry, we'll definitely get to the bottom of this, including these thugs. We won't let our heroes cry, and we won't let any of the bad guys go. This is my promise to all of you. We want to see him if he's alive, and we want to see his corpse if he's dead." A traveler shouted. "His name is Poplar Fruit. Please, please, please help me find him." Song Ji-won said with tears in his eyes. "We didn't know what happened at the time. Poplar Fruit, Poplar Fruit. In order to save everyone, he didn't care about his own safety. You must bring him back to us." "Okay, we promise." Huang Mingxi even took out a book and asked, "What's his name?" "Which yang? Which fruit?" "Mui yang, fruit, as in fruit. He's 25 or 26 years old, very tall, at least 185 meters. Song Ji-won quickly said, "He's very famous. You'll know if you search his name online." In the end, the police arranged for Song Ji-won and Chun Anlin, as well as Fong Beibei and Kiki, who had fainted from crying, to rest in the hotel. Some of the other passengers left, while some volunteered to stay and be Poplar Fruit's witnesses. Kuan-ming would definitely not sleep that night. On the internet, all the major media outlets began to report this shocking news. Soon, some news about Poplar Fruit spread from the passengers. Then, some of the passengers' videos appeared one by one. Tonight was lively, and tomorrow would be even more lively. Chapter 1084. The whole world was looking for Poplar Fruit, but where was the Poplar Fruit? Although he had been electrocuted, Poplar Fruit was fine. He didn't experience any transmigration, rebirth, or other strange phenomena. He just slept, and it was a very long sleep. For Poplar Fruit, 6 hours was a record. It wasn't hard to understand. He had been too tired recently. He had been running around in the mountains for the past few days, worrying about the safety of the 120 people. He hadn't had a good rest at all. The fight 6 hours ago had also consumed a lot of his energy. It was mainly because he was worried about Fong Beibei and Kiki's situation. Poplar Fruit slept for 6 hours with the help of the electric baton. When he woke up, Poplar Fruit found himself handcuffed in a large interrogation room. This could be considered as entering the palace for the second time. Yang Guo recalled her dark history of standing up for Duan Shueching back in Yangcheng. She couldn't be more familiar with this ice-cold interrogation room. Fuck, that bastard. Poplar Fruit shook his head and stared. He wasn't scolding the police. He was worried about the leader of the group who had escaped after being hit by his flying knife. "Hey, you're awake." At this time, a female police officer with short black hair pushed the door open. She was shocked when she saw Poplar Fruit staring at her. She quickly jumped out and closed the door. "Hey, wait." Poplar Fruit was depressed. Was he as fierce as he looked? Of course, he didn't know that the female police officer, in fact, she was my daughter, who had been working for less than a year, had already determined that he was a ruthless thug. She was scared when she saw him staring at her. "Hey, is there anyone here?" Poplar Fruit frowned and shouted. After a while, the big iron door of the interrogation room was opened again. A middle-aged police officer and the female police officer walked in. The middle-aged police officer's hand was still on the holster at his waist. The holster was already unbuckled, and he could pull out the gun at any time. You can't run away, or else we'll shoot." My daughter said nervously. "I think we should wait for the director to come back and interrogate him." The middle-aged police officer was even more nervous than the female police officer. He whispered, "The director told us to keep an eye on him. If he escapes, we'll be in big trouble." The little policewoman was still a little hesitant, but she straightened her thin chest and said, "No, don't you think this is a good opportunity for us to make a contribution? Hey, can you guys listen to me for a moment?" Yangwood didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at them. They didn't care about him at all. He interrupted. "What do you want to say?" My daughter asked. "Haven't you realized that you've caught the wrong person?" Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, "Caught the wrong person?" "Impossible. It's impossible for us special police officers to catch the wrong person," my daughter said with certainty. Poplar Fruit sighed and said, "Please, when you catch people, can't you distinguish between the good and the bad? If you don't catch the bad guy, why did you catch me?" Special police officer said, "You're the thug who cut people." My daughter stared at Poplar Fruit and said, unconvinced, Dear, the one I cut is the thug, okay? When you rushed in, you didn't wait for me to explain. You electrocuted me. Poplar Fruit said helplessly and angrily. Do you know there's another thug who ran away in the chaos? Don't try to confuse us. We have the fiery eyes of truth. No, what I mean is we're good police officers who can see through everything. My daughter shouted. She was full of righteousness, but a little silly. Poplar Fruit shook his head. He was going crazy. He took a deep breath and said, "How about this? I won't argue with you. Take out your phone and search for Poplar Fruit's name on the internet. Then you'll know." "Who's Poplar Fruit?" my daughter asked in confusion. Both of Yong's hands were cuffed. She could only point at her own face from afar. Speechless, she said, "It's me, Yonghua. Mui Yong, the fruit of apple." "Chun Jing, let's not listen to him. Be careful not to be tricked by him." The middle-aged police officer looked over and said to my daughter, "So her name is Chun Jing." Chun Jing waved her hand and said indifferently, "What's the matter? It's not like I'll lose anything by checking." "Chun Jing, be careful, it's a trap." The middle-aged police officer was long-winded, but he still looked over and asked curiously, "Chun Jing, where did you buy the pendant on your phone?" Chun Jing looked at him speechlessly and said, "Uncle, I finally understand why you've been doing household administration. Why do you always pay attention to these useless things? We're working on a case. If you make a contribution, won't you get a promotion and a raise?" The middle-aged police officer smiled awkwardly and said, "I think it's pretty, so I want to buy one from our Xiao and I." "Okay, did you find it? If you found it, then let me go. I was just doing a good deed, and I got caught." "Seriously?" Poplar Fruit knocked on the table and asked. My daughter suddenly screamed, startling Poplar Fruit and the middle-aged police officer. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" the middle-aged police officer asked nervously. "Uncle." Chun Jing pulled the middle-aged police officer to the side and whispered, It seems like we really caught the wrong person." Half an hour later, the special police officer who brought Poplar Fruit in and the station's police station chief bowed and apologized to Poplar Fruit. The young policewoman was still standing behind them with a smug look on her face, but the middle-aged policeman was smart enough not to follow them. "It's okay for me to be wronged. It's just," Poplar Fruit touched his wrist that was just uncuffed and asked doubtfully, "There was a thug in black. Did you catch him?" The captain of the SWAT team scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry, we thought you were the one. So after we subdued you, the thug got up from the ground and suddenly picked up your knife to chop our comrade. Then I fired a shot, and he died." "He died?" Poplar Fruit was a little surprised, but he didn't care. He cared about the leader in black. "No, I'm not talking about him. But this thug was pestering me, mainly to buy time for another thug to escape. That was their mastermind. When I fought with them, these thugs all listened to the orders of the mastermind, and they often used very provocative words. It's useless to catch the others. Catching him is the most important thing." Poplar Fruit said in a deep voice, "So, what I'm asking is, did you catch a thug who was running in the direction of the station and was injured? I threw the knife out and made a cut on his right arm. Right here, about this long." "Mastermind?" The special police team captain's expression became dignified. He said, "We didn't notice the third person at that time. No, I have to report this to the higher-ups immediately." With that, he hurriedly walked outside. Chapter 1085. Director, when can I leave? After the SWAT team leader left, Poplar Fruit and the others were left alone again. Poplar Fruit asked anxiously. It was already dawn, but he still hadn't seen Fong Bei and the others. His worries were getting heavier and heavier. The director of the station waved his hand and said, "Comrade Poplar Fruit, you can't leave for the time being. We need you to cooperate with us to investigate and hunt down these thugs." "I see." Poplar Fruit was a little disappointed. He said, "It's my duty to help, but can you lend your phone? I want to tell my family that I'm safe. They were also at the scene yesterday. Now that they haven't seen me for so long, they're probably worried sick." He had nothing on him now, let alone a phone. The director hesitated for a moment and nodded. Chun Jing took the first step. She took out her phone and handed it to Poplar Fruit. She said with a smile, "Do you still remember the number?" Do you want me to help you find your phone? She was quickly glared at by the director. My daughter stuck out her tongue and shrank her head. However, it was very strange that such a young policewoman like her was mingling here, yet no one scolded her. No need, I can remember. Poplar Fruit only wanted to contact Fong Beibei. He didn't have the patience to wait for his phone to be found. After dialing Fong Beibei's phone, Poplar Fruit put it to his ear. Then, he looked at their eyes and simply took it down. He turned on the speaker and directly broadcast the whole scene. Hello, who is this? Poplar Fruit heard Song Jiwen's tired voice, and some vague, crying sounds came from the receiver. Poplar Fruit's heart suddenly tightened. He said, Mosquito, it's me. Let Beibei answer the phone. Laogua. Fuck. Song Jiwen's voice suddenly rose. It was hard to tell whether he was surprised, excited, or excited to spread the news immediately. Perhaps it was both. He immediately said loudly, Laogua, where have you been? Do you know how worried we are about you? Beibei had been crying all night. Kiki was also crying. We all thought you were beaten to death by those stupid cops. Coincidentally, the SWAT team leader who had just returned from his report overheard the conversation. The group of policemen looked at each other and smiled awkwardly. I'm fine. Give the phone to Beibei. Poplar Fruit urged again. Poplar Fruit soon heard the sound of sniffling. Fong Beibei's hoarse voice could be heard. She choked with sobs as she said, Uncle, I'm fine. Poplar Fruit said quickly, Baby, why are you crying like a big dirty cat again? Don't cry. Yesterday, I thought you. Fong Beibei was so sad that she couldn't continue speaking, but in fact, her mood had improved a lot. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Okay, don't cry. I'm really fine. There's nothing wrong at all. It's just that there's a misunderstanding with the police. I'm still in the police station now. I'll be able to see you after the investigation is completed. Okay. Fong Beibei was so happy that she cried again. She could only respond with a soft nasal voice. It was so sweet that all the policemen who were listening to her had goosebumps. How's Kiki? Are you all okay? Poplar Fruit was also very worried about Kiki. Although it was still very early, not even 6 o'clock, Poplar Fruit thought that Kiki shouldn't have woken up yet. She also cried a lot. In her dream, she said that she wanted Daddy. Fong Beibei said in a low voice, Maybe she'll wake up after a while, but she'll definitely cry again if she doesn't see you when she wakes up. Poplar Fruit's heart ached. He turned his head and asked the director and the others, Well, can I ask if my family can come and see me while I'm cooperating with your investigation? My daughter is still young. Without me, she'll definitely make a lot of noise. Everyone was a little hesitant. My daughter, Police Officer Chen Jing, walked out and shook the director's arm. She said, Uncle Wu, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Let's give them an office to rest. Didn't the city leader always say that we have to be humane and not be too rigid? Isn't that leader your father? The director cursed in his heart. If it weren't for Chen Jing's background, if it were any other police officer who dared to exceed their authority, they would definitely die a horrible death. Director Wu, I think Lil Chen is right. Poplar Fruit isn't a bad person. We still need his help. Don't be too harsh. The captain of the special police team also advised. Only I'm the bad guy. The director was a little depressed, but he still smiled and said to Poplar Fruit, Since everyone has said so, Poplar Fruit, let your family come over. But don't hinder our work. You know, this is a very special time. Poplar Fruit was overjoyed. After thanking him, he quickly told Fong Beibei to ask Song Jiwen to send them over. Fong Beibei and the others came quickly. The hotel they were staying at wasn't far. Song Jiwen drove and arrived at the police station in less than 10 minutes. Poplar Fruit went up to them and wanted to hug Fong Beibei. In the end, he was hugged by Song Jiwen first. He was also worried that Poplar Fruit was worried sick. He flipped through Poplar Fruit's clothes and asked long-windedly, Damn kid, you didn't lose an arm or a leg, right? I'm fine, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Fortunately, Chan Anlin, who couldn't stand it, pulled him back and said angrily, Why are you going to join the fun? Get down. Baby, Kiki. Poplar Fruit went up and hugged Fong Beibei and Kiki, whose eyes were red and began to cry again. He said softly, I'm sorry to have made you worry. No, as long as you're fine. That's the most important thing. After Fong Bei let Poplar Fruit carry Kiki, she put her hand around Poplar Fruit's waist and let his right hand hold her tightly. Although I don't take a shower all day and I stink, it's so good to smell your scent. Fong Bei giggled. She was crying tears of joy, but her smile was very sweet. Silly baby. Poplar Fruit lovingly helped Fong Bei tidy up her hair. I miss you too, Papa. Kiki, in her father's arms, rubbed her eyes with her hand and muttered. Kiki actually just woke up. Because she had slept enough, she woke up when the adults walked and shook her. She was crying just now, but after seeing her father, she forgot to cry. Her tears were hanging. Daddy misses you too. Poplar Fruit lowered his head and kissed his daughter's face. He pulled out his hand from Fong Bei and gently wiped the golden beans on Kiki's face. He said with a smile, Was Kiki very brave yesterday? Daddy wasn't around. No, Kiki was very scared. She was crying. The little girl pursed her lips and said with grievance, Papa said he would come back, but Kiki didn't see Papa, and then Mama Ma was also crying. Okay. Daddy promised you that next time, I will do what I say. I will not stand Kiki up, okay? Poplar Fruit smiled and kissed Kiki's face again. Kiki, of course, would also return the favor. She hugged her father's neck and forcefully left a wet kiss mark on her father's face. Then she curiously asked, Daddy, what do you mean by standing Kiki up? Chapter 1086. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up as he turned around and said, Lu Zifeng. That's probably the name. Can you check this name? Did you find anything? Yin Wanxiong quickly came over and asked. Poplar Fruit pointed to a simple hand-drawn map in the notebook. There was a mountain drawn on it and some Uyghur letters written on it. He said, If I'm not wrong, this is the map they escaped from, but it's a pity that it's too simple. There are no other clues at all. Although I don't know what this mountain is called, this wavy line here is not a river, but a border. Poplar Fruit's finger gently drew on a few words on the map. There's a cave on this mountain. They had food and water in it. As long as they hide in it, they can wait for Lu Zifeng to send them out of the country. Poplar Fruit said, I guess so, because there is no phone number on it. There's only the word wait written in the cave, and then this arrow points to the border. Do you know where this mountain is? Or where are they going? Laos? Miandian? Or Nanhua? Yin Wanxiong asked a lot of questions. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, I don't know. Maybe they still have a map, but it has been torn up. He pointed to the traces of torn pages in the notebook, feeling a little regretful and unwilling. If it was just a name that had been transliterated twice, it would be very difficult to find the person who had provided the smuggling channel for the thugs in the vast sea of people. Hey, wait. A capable criminal policeman next to him stepped forward and said, Director Yin, could this be Luda? Luda? Yin Wanxiong asked doubtfully. Luda is a local snake in Wenshan. The criminal policeman said, he has a lot of connections with the underground forces in Nanhua. After that, his nickname was Lunatic Lu. Isn't that Lu Zifeng? Wait a minute. Poplar Fruit suddenly realized. He clapped his hands and said, I got it. Poplar Fruit raised the paper in his hand and said, I just said Lu Zifeng because the Uyghur language is written from right to left. But in fact, when they wrote this name, they probably wrote it according to the Chinese characters. Look at this stroke. The strokes here are connected, which means that they wrote the name from left to right. How cunning. Yin Wanxiong sighed and immediately ordered, focus on monitoring Lu don't alert him. In addition, keep an eye on the major hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies in the province. As long as there are any abnormal patients or the purchase of large amounts of hemostatic cotton and disinfectants, report immediately. Immediately, someone walked out and quickly spread the news. Yang would continue to flip through the notebooks to see if she could find any clues from them. It looked like they were copied from the teachings of the church. However, he didn't find any useful information. It seemed that the group of thugs had destroyed a lot of information before they left. The map, just now, seemed to have been left in the notebooks and forgotten. In the afternoon, after Kiki got up, she called Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit talked to Kiki for a long time, comforting the little girl who was unhappy because she couldn't see her father. As he talked, he also walked around the house. Fortunately, this guy had worked hard and made a lot of contributions. The police investigators restrained themselves and didn't throw him out. Hey, wait. Poplar Fruit suddenly said to Kiki on the phone, Kiki, Dad has something urgent to deal with. Dad will call you later, okay? But Kiki hasn't finished yet. Kiki still wants Dad to buy a cake and a beautiful bell for gold. Huh? Oh, Papa is so bad. Don't wait for Kiki to finish. Kiki heard the busy tone from the phone and angrily turned to complain to Fong Bei. Poplar Fruit hurriedly ran to the captain of the criminal police team next to him. Yin Wanxiong had returned to the hall not long ago to command. Captain Huang, I found it, Poplar Fruit said with some excitement. Captain Huang couldn't wait to ask, what did you find? Poplar Fruit, tell me. Poplar Fruit had given them a lot of surprises today. Every time, he could give them a big push for this operation. The word cave. Poplar Fruit quickly said, it's not a cave, we all misunderstood. It's Dongting Mountain, Winshan City's Dongting Mountain. Poplar Fruit pulled Captain Huang over and pointed to the land between Winshan City and Nanhua. There was a long mountain range marked on it, and the name Shuanghua Mountain was written on it. Here, Poplar Fruit pointed to the Nanhua language and said, this mountain borders Nanhua. In our country, it's called Shuanghua Mountain, but in Nanhua, it's called Dongting Mountain. I finally understand why they forgot to take this map with them. Poplar Fruit said excitedly. It's because this was originally an abandoned map that was clipped in a notebook. When they wrote the word cave, they probably felt that they couldn't write it too straightforwardly, so they abandoned the map. Poplar Fruit felt that his deduction was correct. Just as Poplar Fruit was deducing, new developments came from the Kunming investigation headquarters. The railway police had found a pool of blood on a freight train that had just arrived in Winshan City. At the same time, the Winshan City police reported their progress. Luda got rid of the police's tracking. The driver of the train said that Luda had escaped half an hour ago through the mall's disguise. All signs indicated the direction of the thug's escape. It was definitely Winshan City's Wui. If they didn't block their escape route in time, they would definitely escape. As long as they escaped to Nanhua or even other countries through the underground tunnels or other channels, it would be extremely difficult to catch them. Lock down the mountain immediately. Yin Wanxiong, who had received Poplar Fruit's report, commanded decisively. Increase the police force and police dogs. Don't let them escape. It wasn't just the Winshan police. The provincial capital had also increased the police force and sent the army to help search the mountain. Poplar Fruit's mission was over, so he returned to the police station to meet up with Fong Bei and the others. He was then punched by his daughter. Of course, Poplar Fruit, who was no longer a suspect, was free. They returned to the hotel room that the police had arranged for them to rest. However, before they could settle down in the room, Yin Wanxiong called, Poplar Fruit, we caught them. Yin Wanxiong was very excited because they had almost effortlessly ambushed Luda and the thug's mastermind on the dirt road leading to Dongting Mountain. All of Poplar Fruit's deductions had been correct. Congratulations, Chief Yin. You can breathe a sigh of relief now, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. In fact, Poplar Fruit was also relieved. After all, they had caught these guys. Poplar Fruit didn't have to worry about revenge. Haha, we'll be holding a press conference soon, Yin Wanxiong said with a smile. Why are you telling me this? Poplar Fruit wondered. Poplar Fruit, stay in the room and don't move. I'll send someone to pick you up. You have to attend this press conference too, Yin Wanxiong said with a smile. Chapter 1087. I have to go too, Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Thinking of the reason, Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and said, Director Yin, I don't think it's necessary. Actually, to be able to catch the mastermind, it was all due to the efforts of the police. I don't want to be in the limelight. What do you mean you don't want to be there? You have to be there. Yin Wanxiong sighed and said, It's our Kaiyun police who didn't do our job well. We misunderstood you last night. But Poplar Fruit, you have to do something. This press conference needs you. or else we won't be able to answer to the people. It turned out that the Kunming police force was being condemned by the people all over the country. When they woke up in the morning, besides being shocked by the horrible incident at Kunming train station, they also found out about the hero Poplar Fruit. This hero was rumored to have been killed by the police. If it wasn't for him, we would all be dead. How could we have waited for the police to come? A traveler who had personally experienced the tragic escape said in an interview with the media. From the point of view of different travelers, people could see the sudden and dangerous outbreak of the incident. Some travelers even said that they had been sitting next to the thugs, and that there was only a thin line between life and death. If it wasn't for Yongwood descending from the heavens like Superman or Spider-Man in the movies, defeating the thugs one by one with his bare hands, the number of casualties in this incident would have probably doubled. Because there wasn't any news about Poplar Fruit, and even the Kunming government's response to the Poplar Fruit incident was very slow, they didn't introduce the situation of Poplar Fruit at the first press conference in the morning. At that time, Poplar Fruit hadn't woken up yet, so people started to be angry. No one knew who instigated it. Maybe it was because of the deep resentment of the people, but the Kunming police force became the target of condemnation. Even the CCTV Morning News had a few questions about the Kunming police force. One of them asked why there was no news about Poplar Fruit. The earliest response came from the official Weibo of the Kunming Police Department. It was already past 11 p.m. They said that they had found Poplar Fruit and were currently assisting in the investigation. This short message couldn't satisfy people's thirst at all. Moreover, it was vague and didn't give a satisfactory answer even until noon. At that time, there were already netizens who guessed that Poplar Fruit had already met with a tragic end, and the Kunming police were only delaying the news and not reporting it. This conjecture was not without reason. After the gunshot, Poplar Fruit was indeed dragged out by the police like a corpse. Poplar Fruit's situation affected everyone's hearts. Not to mention his family and friends. Song Jiwen had forgotten to inform the school, causing Higashiyama University and even the Ministry of Education to make things difficult for the Ministry of Public Security. They demanded a thorough investigation of Poplar Fruit's whereabouts and encounter. The cultural world, including teacher Mo Yin and other writers, asked about Poplar Fruit's whereabouts on Weibo and other public platforms. Some of Poplar Fruit's close friends in the entertainment industry also paid close attention to the progress of the matter. Poplar Fruit had already dominated Weibo. People lit candles to pray for Poplar Fruit and the innocent people who were injured or killed in the incident. Tungsun News specially made a special topic for this incident, and Poplar Fruit used thousands of words and more than 50 pictures to report it. Who is Poplar Fruit? This was a question about Poplar Fruit's report. It was asked to the readers, but everyone could find the answer in it. Tungsun News could be said to have the most right to speak about Poplar Fruit's report. Ever since Poplar Fruit emerged, Tungsun News had been accompanying and reporting on him. Now, very few people might remember that Poplar Fruit, who appeared in front of everyone because of the biography of Steve Jobs, was young, but also confident and strong. He could calmly and generously speak at the press conference, answer Professor Luo Lin's test fluently, and even translate Steve Jobs' letter to his wife in front of everyone's eyes. His beautiful and impeccable words were just like his handsomeness, making people who understood and did not understand intoxicated. However, Poplar Fruit did not continue to be exposed to the spotlight. Just like his usual style, he kept a low profile and worked very hard. What did Poplar Fruit do in the year when the media did not pay attention to him? He translated Mo Yan's novel, allowing Mo Yan's literary talent to bloom in the selection of the Nobel Prize. He also translated The Fantasy of the Young School. His translation skills were so good that even a famous director like Lian had to lower his status to negotiate with him. He entered Higashiyama University to further his studies. But before he entered the university, he had already published a thesis that opened a new level of translation theory. He learned as many as 14 languages, and this number had long become a thing of the past. Because of a trip, he came to a remote and poor Hmong village. He used his own money to equip the children with modern machines so that they could see the outside world and touch their own futures. He also single-handedly created remote volunteer teaching, which made teaching easier and made university students more enthusiastic about participating in public welfare. Oh, by the way, Poplar Fruit also did a lot of things. For example, he and his girlfriend designed Hearthstone, which was currently popular all over the world. Also, he and his daughter made a guest appearance and invested in Unexpectedly, which had now become a major symbol of new online media. Poplar Fruit once again entered the media's field of vision because of his fun at Bali Fashion Week. However, this time, he became the focus of attention all over the world. Poplar Fruit succeeded. He even changed the European and American fashion industry's perception of Chinese models. However, just when everyone thought that Poplar Fruit was a model and should be a model, he used his actions to tell the world that his real job was as a translator, a teacher, and an academic researcher. The translations of the works of 2 consecutive winners of the Nobel Prize in Literature were handed over to him. In a year, the translation results had created a value of billions of dollars. He had personally pushed Chinese online literature to the top 100 bestsellers in the world and started a craze for Chinese online literature all over the world. Such achievements were so dazzling that no one could pretend not to see them. Who dare to say that Poplar Fruit was not a translator? Even adding the word home to acknowledge his greatness was not an exaggeration, right? As for being a teacher, let's not talk about being a teacher in a narrow sense. Poplar Fruit was still a student and was only an assistant. Although he had been teaching university courses for more than a year, Poplar Fruit had not reached the level of a professor, so this did not count. However, what if his contribution to remote teaching was included? Poplar Fruit's remote teaching had benefited more than 6,000 students from poor mountainous areas in Liang City. He also taught English classes from grade 1 to grade 6. The quality of his videos made all the primary school teachers feel ashamed of their inferiority. In this way, it was reasonable for more than 6,000 students from poor mountainous areas to address Poplar Fruit as a teacher. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was a teacher in a broad sense. In a narrow sense, he would definitely be an excellent professor in the future. Chapter 1088. Needless to say, the academic side was even more so. Previously, the academic community had already exposed most of Poplar Fruit's secrets. The latest research on word splitting was known as a subversive theoretical discovery in Chinese education. Tung Sun's news with pictures and text allowed everyone to once again recognize Poplar Fruit and the greatness of Poplar Fruit. Perhaps, if Yang Guo's achievements were placed in the historical record, it would be somewhat lacking. However, if one were to take Yang Guo's age into account, which was only 25 or 26 years old, it was enough for him to look down on the majority of his peers. Including in the world, there were very few young people as talented and creative as Poplar Fruit. There were actually many geniuses, but there were not many who were as low-key and focused as Poplar Fruit. Looking at the historical illusions at home and abroad, how many geniuses fell in the pursuit of pleasure after becoming famous? However, Poplar Fruit did not. He did not lose himself in the pursuit of the media. Instead, he maintained a low-key attitude and did his own academic and public welfare work. If Poplar Fruit was still alive, China would steadily gain an academic master with unlimited potential in the future. That was the evaluation of Poplar Fruit by a professor at Capital University. He served as an expert judge at Poplar Fruit's press conference last year. People would be shocked by Poplar Fruit's achievements. They would be moved by Poplar Fruit's love for his daughter and girlfriend. They would also be surprised by the superb skills that Poplar Fruit suddenly showed. They would respect Poplar Fruit because he risked his own safety to save thousands of tourists. They would also be angrier because of the injustice that Poplar Fruit might have suffered. In fact, this matter was no longer China's own business. Foreign media also gave the headlines to Kunming, who had such a big incident. For the time being, regardless of the controversy that some countries showed on the definition of a terrorist attack, the leaders of many countries stood up and condemned the bloody attack. The United Nations, including Secretary General Mr. Pan, condemned the terrorist attack on civilians in the strongest manner. Of course, there were also condolences and sympathy, but more importantly, they called for the terrorists to be brought to justice and for the whole world to pay attention to such cruel terrorist acts. On this issue, the entire world was on the same side. The wave caused by Poplar Fruit was a step slower. However, the popularity of the surveillance video, the number of views on YouTube exceeded 100 million that day, was enough for people all over the world to recognize the power of Poplar Fruit. Some media even praised Poplar Fruit by using well-known kung fu stars such as Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li. Was this the magical Chinese kung fu? Poplar Fruit was like Bruce Lee in Fierce Dragon Crossing the River, Jackie Chan in Rush Hour, and Jet Li in The Expendables. Wasn't that the case? Even when faced with an enemy who had the advantage in numbers, he still dared to charge in and out, killing the enemy until not a single armor was left. However, Poplar Fruit was once a celebrity that attracted the attention of the world. Through the Chinese media, the media quickly dug out the true identity of this kung fu master. All of a sudden, the whole world exploded, especially when the foreign media translated the Chinese media's report on Poplar Fruit's encounter, especially the repost of Tung Sun's news. The foreign netizens exclaimed, "Isn't this the real-life version of Hulk?" Before Hulk's transformation, he was also a genius scholar who looked weak and fragile. Of course, people were more worried about Poplar Fruit's encounter. Was such a heroic figure still alive? Under the incitement of Tung Sun's news, the anger of the Chinese netizens, and the attention of the whole world, the Kunming police unknowingly stood on the cusp of the storm. Of course, this was their own fault. Who asked them to not give the people a clear answer? In fact, this was also caused by not paying enough attention to it. Who asked this to be a country that paid attention to the collective instead of individual heroism? Poplar Fruit's incident was really too insignificant in front of the entire terrorism case. In the middle of the night, the entire Kunming and Kaiyun province's public security system was busy. They only had one goal, which was to maintain stability and eliminate violence. This included during the day when the netizens were already excited, but they were still thinking about catching the bad guys. Otherwise, they would not be able to explain to the country and the people. This idea was not wrong. It could only be said that they had not deeply realized the power of the internet. They did not realize that the era of self-media was no longer slow enough for them to respond to the information transmission speed of the traditional media. It was only when the investigation team from the central government arrived and people who truly understood the situation came that this matter was taken seriously. Therefore, there was the scene of Poplar Fruit receiving a call from Yan Wanxiang. Well, it was time to attend the press conference. It seemed like the promise to have dinner with Fang Beibei and Kiki in the evening was ruined again. Poplar Fruit quickly took a shower and changed into a clean set of clothes. His previous clothes were ruined and stained with blood. He had worn them all day while running around. Only a jacket. After changing, Fang Beibei put them in a bag for Chun Jing to use as evidence. Poplar Fruit's own clothes were also lost in the chaos and could not be found in a short time. Song Jiwen ran out to buy clothes for Poplar Fruit. With Poplar Fruit's height, it was really difficult to buy clothes for him. In the end, the clothes he bought did not fit him. Poplar Fruit's casual pants were worn into crop pants. The shirt was too short, so Poplar Fruit simply rolled it up and wore it as a short-sleeve shirt. As for the jacket, Song Jiwen's taste was too bad. He actually bought an extremely ugly large military cotton padded jacket. Although Poplar Fruit was not picky, he did not want to be burned to death by the jacket. Anyway, with his physique, he did not feel cold. Thus, he went out in his summer clothes. It had to be said that as long as a person was tall and handsome, they would look good in anything. Although Poplar Fruit's clothes did not fit him well, it gave him an indescribable charm. When he entered the city hall where the press conference was held, the younger female civil servants could not take their eyes off him. This was a government press conference. Naturally, it would not be like the press conference where Poplar Fruit could do whatever he wanted. Very quickly, someone came over to communicate with Poplar Fruit. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was upright and did not offend the other party. Furthermore, there were some things that did not allow Poplar Fruit to say. Poplar Fruit did not mind. He felt that it was better to stay out of the limelight. In the hall outside, the press conference had not yet started, but the reporters who had entered were already discussing. There was no other reason. On the rostrum of the press conference, there was a nameplate with Poplar Fruit's name written on it. That's right. Maybe the Kunming police were not lying. Poplar Fruit might really be alive. It's good that he's alive. It's good that he's alive. After the bloody incident, people's expectations couldn't be any higher. There were already reporters taking pictures of Poplar Fruit's nameplate. They could not wait to share this news with the netizens and the world that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.